SpongeBob SquarePants looks like the most innocent show ever made. Bright colors, goofy jokes, and talking sea creatures living their best lives under the sea. But if you've really been paying attention, you know there's something much darker lurking beneath the surface of Bikini Bottom. Today we're diving deep into the most shocking character lore in SpongeBob SquarePants. From SpongeBob's obsessive boundary violations to Mr. Krabs' greed-damaged brain, from Patrick's emotional manipulation to Plankton's suicidal breakdown, we're exploring the hidden psychology that proves this show is way darker than anyone realized. Trust me, you'll never look at Bikini Bottom the same way again.
The one bad thing about every SpongeBob character. SpongeBob SquarePants is obsessive and cannot respect boundaries. This might sound harsh for everyone's favorite fry cook, but it's an issue that shows up again and again throughout the series. SpongeBob often puts his own wants and curiosity before other people's privacy and personal space. While his endless energy and optimism make him lovable, there's a pattern where SpongeBob struggles to take no for an answer and has trouble understanding when he should back off. SpongeBob genuinely cares about his friends and has good intentions most of the time. The problem is that his enthusiasm sometimes blinds him to other people's feelings and boundaries. When SpongeBob gets fixated on something, he can become so focused that he ignores clear signals from others that they want him to stop. The most clear example of this behavior comes in the secret box. When Patrick shows him a mysterious box but refuses to show what's inside, SpongeBob's curiosity takes over completely. Any friend would naturally be curious, but SpongeBob takes it to an extreme level that crosses important lines. First, he tries to convince Patrick by sharing his own secrets, hoping Patrick will feel obligated to share his. SpongeBob tells Patrick about his job, his sleeping habits, his food choices, and even shows him his underwear, all while hoping Patrick will feel pressured to open the box. When Patrick maintains his boundary and refuses to show the contents, SpongeBob doesn't respect it. Instead of accepting his friend's decision, he escalates the situation. He tries to physically peek into the box multiple times, ignoring Patrick's clear discomfort and repeated refusal. Patrick becomes so frustrated that he has to threaten their friendship, saying, "If you ever come near my secret box again, we won't be friends anymore." For most people, this would be a wake-up call, but SpongeBob's obsession has grown too strong. That night, SpongeBob convinces himself that sneaking into Patrick's house while he's sleeping would be acceptable, because Patrick won't get upset and I'll have my own little secret. This shows how his good intentions have gotten twisted by his inability to let things go. He breaks into his friend's home wearing a mask and tries to take the box while Patrick sleeps. The break-in scene is played for comedy, but it reveals something troubling about SpongeBob's character. He creeps through Patrick's house, making noise and hiding when Patrick stirs. When Patrick unconsciously reaches for the box, SpongeBob actually replaces himself with it, showing just how far his obsession has taken him. When Patrick catches him and calls him the clam burglar, the situation has become genuinely serious. SpongeBob is behaving like a thief, even though he doesn't see it that way. The fact that it's his best friend's house makes it worse, because it shows how his obsession can override his respect for the people he cares about. The irony is that when Patrick finally shows him the contents, it appears to just be a string. SpongeBob's massive violation of trust over something seemingly meaningless. Later, we learned Patrick was hiding an embarrassing photo of SpongeBob, which makes the whole situation even more pointless. SpongeBob's difficulty accepting situations beyond his control shows up clearly in SpongeBob, You're Fired. When Mr. Krabs fires him to save money, SpongeBob's reaction reveals his struggle with not getting his way. While being fired would upset anyone, SpongeBob's response goes far beyond normal disappointment. He floods the Krusty Krab with his tears, making his emotional breakdown everyone else's problem. His reaction is so extreme that customers have to leave, and Squidward has to physically remove him. This is an inability to process that sometimes things don't go the way we want them to. When he starts job hunting, SpongeBob shows he can't adapt to a different workplace requirement. At every restaurant, he's given specific instructions about what to make and how to make it. But SpongeBob insists on making his own version instead. At the Weenie Hut, he makes weenie patties instead of hot dogs. At Pizza Pie Hole, he creates pizza patties instead of regular pizzas. At Taco Sombrero, he makes burrito patties that make a mess. This pattern shows that SpongeBob doesn't really want to work anywhere else. He wants every workplace to be like the Krusty Krab. Instead of learning new skills or adapting to new environments, he tries to force every situation to match what he's comfortable with. While this shows his loyalty to his original job, it also shows his inflexibility when things don't match his expectations. The situation escalates when his former bosses start fighting over him. SpongeBob becomes the center of a war between restaurants, with owners kidnapping him and chaining him to grills. This happens because SpongeBob's obsessive behavior creates chaos wherever he goes, even when people initially want to help him. In The Splinter, SpongeBob's obsessive denial creates real problems for everyone around him. when he gets injured at work, his fixation on hiding the problem makes a minor issue into a major health hazard. SpongeBob knows the splinter is preventing him from doing his job properly, but instead of seeking help or taking time to heal, he becomes obsessed with appearing fine. He ties his spatula to his nose rather than addressing the real problem. When Squidward points out that he should probably go home and take care of the injury, SpongeBob refuses to listen. His determination to seem okay leads him to let Patrick, who has no medical knowledge, treat the injury. Patrick uses a hammer to drive the splinter deeper and applies garbage as medicine. The splinter becomes infected and swollen, turning purple and oozing. By the time Mr. Krabs sees it, the situation has become disgusting and dangerous. When the splinter is finally removed, pus explodes everywhere, potentially contaminating the restaurant. SpongeBob's refusal to accept help didn't just risk his own health. It created an unsanitary situation in a place where food is served to customers. His obsession with perfect attendance put everyone at risk. While SpongeBob's behavior is problematic, it's important to remember that he's not intentionally trying to hurt anyone. His actions come from positive traits taken too far. His curiosity about Patrick's box comes from his love of friendship and sharing. His devastation about being fired comes from his genuine passion for his job. His refusal to acknowledge his injury comes from his strong work ethic. The problem is that SpongeBob's good qualities become harmful when he can't control them or recognize appropriate limits. His love of friendship turns into violation of privacy. His work ethic becomes dangerous stubbornness. His enthusiasm becomes obsession that hurts the people around him. This pattern affects his relationships in subtle but important ways. In the secret box, Patrick has to threaten their friendship just to get SpongeBob to temporarily back off. Even then, SpongeBob immediately violates that boundary when he thinks Patrick won't know. This shows that while SpongeBob cares about Patrick, he struggles to put Patrick's feelings before his own desires. Squidward's constant frustration with SpongeBob is about dealing with someone who consistently ignores social cues and personal boundaries. SpongeBob's refusal to accept that Squidward wants space is still a form of harassment that continues episode after episode. The show often rewards SpongeBob's boundary-crossing behavior, which sends mixed messages to viewers. In the secret box, he gets to see what's in the box despite his violations. In SpongeBob You're Fired, he gets his job back without learning to adapt. In the Splinter, the problem gets solved without real consequences for his poor judgment. This pattern suggests that persistence always pays off and that ignoring boundaries will eventually get you what you want. While the show doesn't intend to teach harmful lessons, it can give viewers the wrong idea about how to handle situations when people say no. SpongeBob's obsessive nature also prevents him from growing as a character. Because his behavior is usually rewarded or forgiven, he doesn't learn from his mistakes. He doesn't develop better self-control or learn to read social situations more carefully. Each episode tends to reset him to the same enthusiastic but boundary-blind state. In the secret box, he never reflects on violating Patrick's trust. In SpongeBob You're Fired, he doesn't learn flexibility or adaptation skills. In the Splinter, he doesn't learn to ask for help when he needs it. While this consistency makes him a reliable character for comedy, it also means he doesn't develop healthier patterns of behavior. It's worth noting that SpongeBob's flaws make him more relatable in some ways. Many people struggle with similar issues on a smaller scale. We've all had moments where our enthusiasm got the better of us, or where we had trouble accepting disappointment, or where we pushed too hard for something we wanted. The difference is that most people learn from these experiences and develop better self-awareness over time. SpongeBob's character stays frozen in a state where his positive traits consistently turn into problems because he can't recognize when to pull back. SpongeBob remains beloved despite these flaws because his heart is genuinely in the right place. His obsessive behavior comes from love, enthusiasm, and dedication rather than selfishness or cruelty. Viewers can see that he means well, even when his actions cause problems. The tragedy is that SpongeBob's boundary issues often work against his own goals. His violation of Patrick's privacy in the secret box nearly destroyed their friendship over something pointless. His inflexibility in SpongeBob You're Fired got him fired from multiple jobs he could have succeeded at. His denial in the Splinter turned a minor problem into a major crisis. If SpongeBob could learn to recognize when others need space, accept disappointment more gracefully, and ask for help when he needs it, he could maintain all his positive qualities while avoiding the problems his obsessiveness creates. His enthusiasm, loyalty, and optimism would still shine through, but they wouldn't come at the expense of other people's comfort and boundaries. These flaws don't make SpongeBob less lovable. If anything, it makes him more human. His struggle with boundaries and obsession is something many viewers can relate to, even if they don't like to admit it. The key is recognizing these patterns so we can do better in our own lives. learning from SpongeBob's mistakes while still appreciating his many wonderful qualities. SpongeBob's constant overstepping of boundaries is made even more difficult to handle by Patrick's lack of effort and responsibility. If you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Patrick's star is lazy and refuses to take responsibility for anything in his life. While SpongeBob gets criticized for being obsessive, Patrick's problem is the complete opposite. He literally does nothing productive and expects everyone else to handle his problems for him. What makes this worse is that Patrick's laziness is about a deep selfishness where he actively avoids responsibility even when it hurts the people closest to him. Patrick actively chooses to let other people suffer while he relaxes. When situations require effort or commitment from him, Patrick either disappears completely or finds excuses to avoid helping. This is a pattern of behavior that consistently damages his relationships and puts others in difficult positions. The most obvious example comes from Rockabye Bivalve, where Patrick and SpongeBob adopt a baby scallop they name Junior. At first, Patrick seems excited about being a parent. He even insists on being the dad, while SpongeBob takes the mom role. They both enjoy the fun parts, playing with Junior, taking him around town, and showing him off to other people. But the moment real responsibility kicks in, Patrick completely abandons his commitment. The very next morning after they adopt Junior, Patrick puts on a business suit, grabs a briefcase, and announces he's going to work because he's the dad. He promises SpongeBob he'll give him a break when he gets home, then walks out the door. What follows is one of the most frustrating displays of Patrick's laziness in the entire series. SpongeBob spends all day taking care of Junior alone, feeding him, changing his diapers, cleaning the house, and handling every single parental duty whilst Patrick is supposedly at work. When Patrick comes home that evening, he's exhausted and immediately sits down to watch TV, completely ignoring his promise to help. This goes on for days. Every morning, Patrick leaves for work with his briefcase, and every evening he comes home too tired to help with anything. SpongeBob gets more and more exhausted, but Patrick just keeps making excuses. Tomorrow for sure, he says. I'll get to it eventually. Meanwhile, Junior's dirty diapers pile up everywhere. In trash cans, in the refrigerator, behind the wallpaper, even on top of Squidward's house. The worst part is when SpongeBob finally discovers what Patrick's work actually is. After Patrick breaks yet another promise to help, SpongeBob follows him and finds Patrick sitting under his rock watching TV all day. His work is literally just relaxing in his chair. His briefcase is full of donuts and ice cream. Patrick has been lying about working while SpongeBob exhausts himself taking care of their baby alone. When SpongeBob confronts him about this, Patrick doesn't feel guilty or apologetic. Instead, he gets defensive and claims he works overtime because sometimes he has to move the antenna or his butt itches. He acts like watching TV all day is genuinely difficult and that SpongeBob should be grateful for his efforts. The chaperone shows Patrick's laziness in a different but equally problematic way. When SpongeBob gets nervous about taking Pearl to prom and asks for advice for help, Patrick is completely useless. While SpongeBob struggles to transform himself into someone long, tan, and handsome for Pearl, Patrick just stands around making unhelpful comments. During the episode, Patrick shows no interest in actually helping SpongeBob succeed. He doesn't offer to help him with the costume, doesn't give useful advice, and doesn't even seem to care whether SpongeBob's night goes well. When SpongeBob is clearly struggling and needs support from his best friend, Patrick is nowhere to be found emotionally or practically. This pattern repeats throughout the whole series. Patrick consistently chooses the path of least resistance, even when his friends desperately need him. He's perfectly happy to benefit from other people's efforts while contributing nothing himself. I'm Your Biggest Fanatic demonstrates another aspect of Patrick's laziness, his complete lack of personal goals or ambitions. While SpongeBob obsesses over joining the Jelly Spotters and goes through increasingly ridiculous tests to prove himself, Patrick spends the entire episode doing absolutely nothing productive. At the Jellyfish Convention, Patrick's only interest is touching displays and following around Jeffrey the Jellyfish like a mindless fan. He has no hobbies, no interests that require effort, and no desire to improve himself in any way. When SpongeBob needs emotional support during his trials with Kevin the Sea Cucumber, Patrick is completely absent. Even worse, at the end of the episode, after SpongeBob has learned an important lesson about hero worship and personal growth, Patrick immediately starts dragging Jeffrey the Jellyfish around in a wagon. He claims to have learned that hero worship is unhealthy, while literally practicing the exact same behavior. Patrick learned nothing and changed nothing, which perfectly represents his approach to life. Patrick's laziness creates serious problems for everyone around him, especially SpongeBob. In Rockabye Bivalve, his refusal to help with Junior nearly leads to a disaster. When SpongeBob and Patrick are arguing about Patrick's laziness, Junior tries to jump out of a two-story window. They almost lose their adopted child because Patrick was too lazy to fulfill his parental responsibilities. SpongeBob consistently has to work twice as hard to compensate for Patrick's lack of effort, whether it's taking care of Junior alone, handling social situations without support, or dealing with any kind of challenge. SpongeBob can't count on Patrick for help. This puts incredible strain on their friendship and forces SpongeBob into situations where he's overwhelmed and exhausted. Patrick's laziness also prevents him from growing as a person. While other characters learn lessons and develop over time, Patrick remains exactly the same. He never faces real consequences for his behavior because SpongeBob always covers for him or forgives him. This enables Patrick to continue being lazy without ever having to change. In Rockabye Bivalve, even after SpongeBob explodes at him about his terrible parenting, Patrick doesn't really learn anything. He promises to do better, breaks that promise immediately, and then gets defensive when called out again. The episode ends with Junior flying away, and Patrick suggesting they have another baby, showing he hasn't understood anything about the responsibility involved in caring for someone else. What makes Patrick's laziness particularly frustrating is that it comes from a place of pure selfishness rather than inability. Patrick is lazy because he simply doesn't care about anything beyond his own immediate comfort. He's perfectly capable of action when it benefits him. He can run after Jeffrey the jellyfish or fight for the last donut, but he won't lift a finger when others need help. This selfishness disguised as laziness sends a terrible message to viewers. Patrick consistently gets away with putting zero effort into his relationships while still maintaining his friendship with SpongeBob. He faces no real consequences for abandoning his responsibilities or lying about his commitments. The show treats his laziness as a quirky personality trait rather than a serious character flaw that hurts people. Patrick's behavior also reinforces harmful gender stereotypes, especially in Rockabye Bivalve. He takes the traditional father role and immediately uses it as an excuse to avoid all childcare responsibilities, while SpongeBob, in the mother role, does all the actual work. This mirrors real-world situations where men use work as an excuse to avoid domestic responsibilities, leaving women to handle everything at home. The episode could have been an opportunity to show Patrick learning about responsibility and commitment, but instead it reinforces the idea that fathers are naturally less capable of childcare, and that mothers should accept doing everything themselves. Patrick's laziness becomes a joke rather than a problem to solve. Patrick's lack of ambition also represents a wasted life. While SpongeBob pursues his passions enthusiastically, Patrick has no interests beyond immediate pleasure. He doesn't work, doesn't have hobbies that require skill, doesn't try to improve himself, and doesn't contribute anything meaningful to his community. He is perfectly content to live under a rock, literally and figuratively. This might seem harmless in a cartoon, but it presents a troubling model for viewers. Patrick shows that you can go through life putting in minimal effort and still maintain relationships and happiness. He never has to face real-world consequences of laziness, financial problems, failed relationships, or personal stagnation. The tragedy is that Patrick has the potential to be a good friend and person, but his laziness prevents him from ever reaching it. In the moments of crisis that he faces, he occasionally shows genuine care for SpongeBob and others. But these moments are fleeting because Patrick won't put in the sustained effort required to be consistently supportive. In Rockabye Bivalve, Patrick genuinely loves Junior and enjoys being a parent during the fun moments. But when parenting requires sacrifice, routine, and daily commitment, Patrick immediately bails. He wants the benefits of relationships without any of the work required to maintain them. Patrick's laziness also makes him unreliable in ways that can be genuinely harmful. When SpongeBob needs support, Patrick often isn't there. When commitment needs to be kept, Patrick finds excuses. When problems need solving, Patrick disappears. This kind of unreliability damages trust and forces other people to either pick up the slack or do without help entirely. The most frustrating aspect of Patrick's character is that his laziness is entirely voluntary. He's not struggling with mental health issues or external obstacles that prevent him from being more active. He simply chooses comfort over effort every single time. This makes his behavior less sympathetic and more selfish than other character flaws in the show. Patrick represents the worst kind of lazy person, someone who could do better but chooses not to. He's intelligent enough to understand when his behavior hurts others, but he consistently prioritizes his own comfort over other people's needs. He makes promises he has no intention of keeping and expects others to be grateful for his minimal efforts. If Patrick could learn to take responsibility for his commitments and put effort into his relationships, he could become the supportive friend that SpongeBob deserves. His laid-back personality could be an asset if it came with reliability and genuine care for others. Instead, his laziness turns what could be positive traits into sources of frustration and disappointment. Until Patrick learns that relationships require effort and that other people's needs matter as much as his own comfort, he'll remain a burden on everyone around him. His laziness is a choice that consistently hurts the people who care about him most. Patrick's laziness leaves others to pick up the slack, much like Squidward, who clings to misery and blames everyone else for his unhappiness. Squidward Tentacles chooses to be miserable and blames everyone else for his problems. While many fans see Squidward as the relatable adult stuck with annoying neighbors, the truth is that Squidward makes his own life worse and refuses to take responsibility for anything. He's not just unlucky or stuck in bad situations. He's someone who's made being miserable his whole personality and uses it as an excuse to treat others badly. This is about Squidward refusing to find joy in anything, even when good things happen to him. He has trained himself to see the worst in every situation, and pushes away chances for happiness because being miserable has become his comfort zone. Squidward's misery is a choice that he protects like it's precious to him. When he gets chances to improve himself or his life, Squidward always chooses to stay bitter and negative. He's not a victim of bad luck. He's someone who has decided that being unhappy is easier than putting effort into changing his life. The best example of this shows up in episodes where Squidward gets exactly what he says he wants, but still manages to be miserable about it. In Squid's Day Off, Squidward finally gets what he's always complaining about: a day away from work in SpongeBob. This should be amazing for someone who never stops whining about his job and his annoying neighbor. Instead of enjoying his freedom, Squidward spends the whole day worrying about what SpongeBob might be doing wrong at the Krusty Krab. He can't relax or enjoy his time off because he's convinced that something terrible will happen. Rather than using his day off to do art, read a book, or do something he claims to enjoy, Squidward chooses to make himself worried and miserable. When he finally goes to check the Krusty Krab, everything is running perfectly without him. SpongeBob has handled everything well, and there are no problems. A normal person might feel relieved or even a little proud of their coworker, but Squidward is actually annoyed that nothing went wrong. He was so invested in being right about SpongeBob messing up that he's disappointed when reality doesn't match his negative expectations. This episode perfectly shows Squidward's real problem. He doesn't actually want things to get better. He wants to be right about everything being terrible so he can justify his miserable attitude. When he sees evidence that his life could be happier or that other people aren't as stupid as he believes, Squidward gets upset rather than happy. Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost shows another side of Squidward's commitment to misery. After an accident with SpongeBob and Patrick's cleaning, they believe Squidward has died and become a ghost. Instead of telling them the truth, Squidward decides to use it to his advantage, making SpongeBob and Patrick wait on him hand and foot. This should be a dream come true for Squidward, finally having power over his annoying neighbors and getting them to do whatever he wants. SpongeBob and Patrick go out of their way to make Ghost Squidward happy, bringing him food, entertainment, and treating him like a king. They're really trying to help what they think is their dead friend find peace. But even when he's getting everything he wants, Squidward stays bitter and mean. He uses his fake ghost status to be cruel and demanding rather than enjoying the special treatment. He could have fun with the situation or appreciate SpongeBob and Patrick's kindness, but instead he chooses to be as unpleasant as possible. When the truth comes out and Squidward gets caught in his lie, he doesn't learn anything about how his neighbors actually care about him or how being mean doesn't make him feel better. He just goes back to his usual complaints as if nothing had happened. The episode shows that even when Squidward gets exactly what he thinks he wants, he still chooses to be miserable. Krusty Love shows how Squidward's negativity affects his view of relationships and his own chances at happiness. When Mr. Krabs falls in love with Mrs. Puff, Squidward immediately becomes negative about the whole situation. Instead of being happy for his boss or even seeing this as a chance for a better work environment, Squidward assumes the worst about everything. Squidward's pessimism about love and relationships shows how deeply his negative attitude has poisoned his view of the world. He can't imagine that good things might happen to people around him, and he definitely can't imagine them happening to himself. His misery has become so complete that he automatically assumes any positive development will somehow make his life worse. Throughout the episode, Squidward makes mean comments and shows clear anger towards Mr. Krabs' happiness. He acts like other people's joy is somehow a personal attack on him. This is about Squidward being basically opposed to happiness existing around him. This pattern repeats constantly throughout the series. Whenever something good happens to SpongeBob, Patrick, or anyone else in Bikini Bottom, Squidward's first reaction is anger rather than happiness. He acts like other people's success or joy takes something away from him, when in reality his neighbor's happiness has no impact on his own life unless he chooses to let it bother him. Squidward's victim mentality becomes really obvious when you compare his actual life to his constant complaints. He has a job that pays well enough for him to own a house, pursue expensive hobbies like art and music, and live comfortably comfortably. He has neighbors who, despite being annoying, really care about him and try to include him in activities. He has opportunities for creativity and self-expression that many people would love to have. But instead of appreciating any of these things, Squidward treats his life like it's a constant tragedy. He acts like working at the Krusty Krab is slavery when it's just a regular job. He treats SpongeBob's friendliness like it's harassment when it's mostly harmless enthusiasm. He complains about his living situation when he chooses to stay in the same place and makes no effort to change anything. The truth is that Squidward could improve his life in many ways if he wanted to. He could look for a different job, move to a different neighborhood, or simply change his attitude about his current situation. But making changes would require effort and risk, and it would mean giving up his identity as someone who suffers more than anyone else. Squidward's misery serves as a purpose for him. It makes him feel superior to everyone around him. By being constantly negative and pessimistic, he gets to act like he's the only one who really understands how terrible life is. He treats his unhappiness like it makes him more intelligent and sophisticated than SpongeBob's optimism or Patrick's carefree attitude. This superiority complex is why Squidward gets so annoyed when things work out well, despite his predictions of doom. In Squid's Day Off, he's not relieved that the Krusty Krab didn't burn down. He's frustrated that his negative worldview wasn't proven right. He needs bad things to happen so he can feel smart for expecting them. Squidward's commitment to misery also prevents him from forming real relationships with anyone. His neighbors make repeated attempts to include him in activities and show him kindness, but Squidward consistently pushes them away. He sees every friendly gesture as an annoyance and every invitation as an intrusion. This creates a cycle where Squidward's negative attitude drives people away, which then reinforces his belief that he's alone and unloved. He could have meaningful relationships with SpongeBob and Patrick if he ever showed real interest in their lives or appreciation for their efforts to connect with him. Instead, he treats their kindness like it's a burden he shouldn't have to deal with. Even worse, Squidward often actively ruins good things that happen to him. When he gets opportunities to showcase his art or music, he often destroys them through his own negative attitude or unrealistic expectations. When people try to be nice to him, he responds with suspicion and hostility. When situations work out in his favor, he finds reasons to be unhappy about them anyway. This self-sabotage shows that Squidward is more comfortable being miserable than he would be being happy. Happiness would require him to admit that his problems aren't entirely caused by other people, and it would mean giving up his identity as someone who's more enlightened than everyone else because he sees how terrible everything is. Squidward's victim mentality also makes him incredibly selfish. He expects everyone around him to deal with his bad moods and negative attitude, but he never makes any effort to be considerate of others. He thinks his suffering gives him the right to be rude, dismissive, and cruel to people who are just trying to live their lives. When SpongeBob is excited about something, Squidward acts like enthusiasm is a personal attack on him. When Patrick does something silly, Squidward treats it like it's specifically designed to ruin his day. He takes everything personally and assumes that other people's behavior is somehow directed at making his life worse, even when most of the time they're not even thinking about him. This self-centered view of the world makes Squidward exhausting to be around. He sucks the energy out of every situation by turning it into another opportunity to complain about his life. He can't let other people enjoy things without making them feel guilty or stupid for being happy. The most frustrating thing about Squidward's character is that he occasionally shows glimpses of being capable of happiness and kindness, but he always goes back to his misery. In rare moments, he admits that he actually cares about SpongeBob or enjoys certain activities, but these moments are always temporary because Squidward is more committed to his negative identity than he is to actually being happy. Squidward represents the worst kind of pessimist, someone who uses their unhappiness as a weapon against other people and an excuse for their own bad behavior. He's not someone who's gone through a tough time and needs support. He's someone who has chosen to make misery his personality and expects everything else to revolve around dealing with his negativity. If Squidward could learn to take responsibility for his own happiness instead of blaming everyone else for his problems, he might actually become the sophisticated, cultured person he thinks he really is. His interests in art and music could bring him real fulfillment if he stopped using them as ways to feel superior to others. But as long as Squidward continues to choose misery over effort, he'll remain trapped in a cycle of his own making. His negativity is a choice he makes every day to prioritize being right about everything being terrible over actually trying to make things better. Squidward could have a much better life if he just stopped fighting so hard to stay miserable. Until he realizes that being a professional victim isn't actually making him happy or superior, he'll continue to waste his potential and push away anyone who might actually care about him. Squidward's misery is a choice, just like Mr. Krabs' greed. Both could be happier if they weren't so stubborn. But before I tell you about Mr. Krabs, make sure you're subscribed. Mr. Krabs' obsession with money makes him lie, steal, and hurt anyone around him, even his own employees. For him, everyone is just a way to make more cash, and he'll destroy anyone who gets in his way. His greed is toxic and harmful to everyone in Bikini Bottom. One Krabs trash shows just how far Mr. Krabs will go for money. The episode starts with him trying to have a yard sale where he's selling literal garbage as expensive antiques. He lies to customers about worthless junk, saying a broken umbrella belonged to the Queen of Switzerland, and calling a toilet plunger a fancy old soup spoon. This is stealing. Mr. Krabs is lying to people to take their money. When someone points out that Switzerland doesn't have a queen, Mr. Krabs just lowers the price a little instead of admitting he lied. He doesn't care about being caught because all he wants is to make money. Things get worse when SpongeBob buys a soda hat for $10. After SpongeBob leaves, people start offering Mr. Krabs huge amounts of money for the same hat, up to $1 million. Instead of being happy for SpongeBob or letting him keep what he bought, Mr. Krabs immediately starts planning to steal it back. Mr. Krabs tries many ways to get the hat from SpongeBob. First, he insults SpongeBob, telling him the hat makes him look like a girl. When that doesn't work, he tries to trade other hats for it. When SpongeBob still says no, Mr. Krabs starts doing criminal things. At night, Mr. Krabs pretends to be a ghost to scare SpongeBob into giving up the hat. He makes up a big lie about the hat being cursed and belonging to a dead person named Smitty Werbenjagerman Jensen. This is him trying to terrify SpongeBob into giving up something he paid for fairly. The plan falls apart when SpongeBob actually goes to the cemetery and puts the hat on a grave with the exact name. Mr. Krab then does multiple crimes. He breaks into a cemetery at night, messes with a grave, and steals from the dead. When the real ghost of Smitty shows up with an army of dead people, Mr. Krabs fights them all just to keep the hat. After destroying an army of ghosts and running back to sell the hat, Mr. Krabs finds out that people discovered a warehouse full of the exact same hats, making them all worthless. All of his lying, scaring, grave robbing, and fighting was for nothing. But instead of learning anything about his greed, Mr. Krabs just moves on to the next money-making scheme. Penny Foolish shows how Mr. Krabs' greed works for even tiny amounts of money and how it makes him completely crazy. The episode starts when Mr. Krabs sees SpongeBob pick up what he thinks is a penny from the ground. A normal person might feel a little jealous, but would forget about it immediately. Mr. Krabs becomes totally obsessed. Mr. Krabs starts seeing pennies everywhere when they actually aren't there. In his car radio, steering wheel, and even the moon. His obsession with one penny that isn't his becomes so strong that he can't function normally. He almost crashes his car because he's so focused on something worth 1 cent. At work the next day, Mr. Krabs questions SpongeBob about the penny and demands that he share it. When SpongeBob says he doesn't have a penny, Mr. Krabs physically attacks him, shaking him upside down so hard that SpongeBob's brain falls out of his head. Mr. Krabs is willing to cause brain damage to his worker over 1 penny. When that doesn't work, Mr. Krabs builds an entire movie theater behind the Krusty Krab and sets the ticket price to 1 penny, hoping to trick SpongeBob into giving it to him. When SpongeBob says he doesn't have a penny, Mr. Krabs destroys the theater in anger. He spent way more money building the theater than he could have made from hundreds of pennies, but his greed has made him completely crazy. Mr. Krabs then puts on a fake charity show called Pennies for the Penniless, where he plays with SpongeBob's emotions by pretending to be someone who desperately needs help. He shows pictures of his money collection with a sad story about not having a penny. This is emotional manipulation designed to make SpongeBob feel guilty enough to give him money. Finally, Mr. Krabs breaks into SpongeBob's house at night with a metal detector to search for the penny. This is burglary, a serious crime that could put him in jail. When he gets caught, he admits to everything and begs SpongeBob for the penny. SpongeBob reveals that he never had a penny at all. He just picked up a piece of old gum. The funniest part is that the gum turns out to be a $500 bill, which SpongeBob throws away because it doesn't fit his gum collection. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs ends the episode still digging holes around SpongeBob's house, convinced the penny is buried somewhere. His greed has made him so crazy that he can't accept reality. Krusty Krab training video shows how Mr. Krabs' greed affects how he treats his workers every day. The training video is supposed to be educational, but it's really propaganda designed to trick workers while making more money for Mr. Krabs. The video shows working conditions that would be illegal in real life as normal and okay. Mr. Krabs refuses to pay Squidward overtime and treats basic workplace safety as optional. The video teaches workers that asking for a raise will always result in being told no, and presents this as normal rather than unfair. The training video also shows Mr. Krabs' attitude toward his workers. He sees them as human resources that exist only to make him money. The video clearly states that workers are like body parts for the restaurant, treating employees as replaceable things rather than people with rights. Most telling, the video ends right before showing the Krabby Patty secret formula, cutting off just as it's about to share the most important information. This perfectly shows how Mr. Krabs views his workers. He wants them to do all the work while keeping them in the dark about anything that might give them power. The video also shows how Mr. Krabs has turned his greed into his system. He's built an entire business around using his workers and customers. The training video is designed to brainwash workers into accepting bad treatment while making them think they should be grateful. Mr. Krabs' greed creates a terrible work environment that hurts everyone around him. SpongeBob, despite his excitement and loyalty, is constantly underpaid and overworked. Mr. Krabs takes advantage of SpongeBob's love of cooking to get maximum work while paying minimum wage. Squidward suffers even more because he knows how unfair Mr. Krabs is, but feels stuck in the job. Mr. Krabs knows Squidward needs the money and uses that need to treat him badly. He denies overtime pay, ignores workplace safety, and shows no concern for worker well-being. Customers also suffer from Mr. Krabs' greed. He regularly tries to cheat them with false advertising, high prices, and sneaky business practices. In One Krabs Trash, he literally commits fraud by lying about the history and value of items. He sees customers not as people to serve, but as targets to exploit. Mr. Krabs' greed also corrupts the entire business environment in Bikini Bottom. His success with dishonest practices encourages other businesses to do similar things. He sets a standard where lying to customers and using workers is seen as normal business behavior. The most disturbing thing about Mr. Krabs' greed is how it stops him from having real relationships with anyone. He sees SpongeBob not as a valued worker or friend, but as a source of labor and potential money. He sees customers not as people to serve, but as walking wallets to empty. In One Krabs' Trash, Mr. Krabs has no problem terrifying SpongeBob with fake ghost stories just to steal his property. In Penny Foolish, he physically attacks SpongeBob and breaks into his house over 1 cent. These aren't the actions of someone who cares about SpongeBob as a person. They're the actions of someone who sees him as an obstacle to money. Mr. Krabs' greed also makes him incredibly two-faced. He demands loyalty from his workers while showing them none in return. He expects honesty from others while constantly lying and cheating. He wants people to trust him while proving over and over that he's completely untrustworthy. The sad part is that Mr. Krabs often ends up worse off because of his greed. In One Krabs Trash, his schemes result in him fighting an army of the dead for a hat that turns out to be worthless. In Penny Foolish, he commits multiple crimes and destroys property over a penny that doesn't exist. His greed consistently creates more problems than just being honest would have caused. Mr. Krabs also misses out on real happiness because of his obsession with money. He has loyal workers who care about him, a successful business, and a comfortable life, but he can't enjoy any of it because he's always focused on making more money. His greed stops him from enjoying what he already has. Mr. Krabs represents what happens when making money becomes more important than treating people well. He shows what happens when greed replaces doing the right thing, and when money becomes the only thing that matters. The show often presents Mr. Krabs' greed as harmless or even smart business sense, but the reality is much darker. He's someone who regularly commits crimes, hurts people, and destroys relationships for money. He's not a lovable penny pincher. He's a predator who uses his power to exploit everyone around him. Mr. Krabs could easily be a successful businessman without being greedy and exploitative. The Krusty Krab is popular and profitable largely because of SpongeBob's cooking skills and enthusiasm. If Mr. Krabs paid fair wages and treated people nicely, he could still make good money while actually deserving the loyalty and respect of his workers. But Mr. Krabs chooses greed over decency every time. He chooses exploitation over cooperation, manipulation over honesty, and quick profit over long-term relationships. His greed is a choice he makes every day to put money over morality. Until Mr. Krabs learns that there's more important things in life than money and that treating people well is more valuable than making maximum profits, he'll continue to be harmful to everyone around him. His greed doesn't just hurt others. It stops him from ever truly being happy or successful in any meaningful way. Mr. Krabs' toxic greed destroys everything around him, but it's not just money that turns people into monsters. Sandy's arrogant superiority makes her just as harmful, even when she's trying to help. Sandy Cheeks thinks she's better than everyone else. While fans love Sandy for being smart and strong, the truth is her intelligence has made her a total know-it-all who talks down to everyone around her. She acts like she's the only smart person in Bikini Bottom and treats her friends like they're idiots who need her to fix everything. Sandy genuinely believes she's superior to everyone and shows it constantly through how she talks to people, handles problems, and reacts when things don't go her way. Her arrogance makes her a terrible friend and usually creates more problems than it solves. Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm shows Sandy's arrogance at its absolute worst. When a giant worm starts eating buildings and scaring everyone in Bikini Bottom, the whole town is terrified and looking for help. Sandy immediately volunteers to handle it, but because she thinks everyone else is too weak and dumb to deal with it. From the second Sandy decides to go after the worm, she acts like everyone's fear is stupid and childish. When SpongeBob tries to warn her about how dangerous the worm is, Sandy basically laughs in his face. She treats his fear like it's ridiculous, even though he's actually seen the worm and knows how scary it is. Sandy's whole attitude during this episode is, I'm from Texas, so I can handle anything that weak ocean people can't. She constantly brings up being from Texas like it automatically makes her better than everyone else in Bikini Bottom. When SpongeBob tries to tell her the worm is big, scary, and pink, Sandy dismisses this by saying, so's Patrick's belly button, but I ain't afraid of that either. This response perfectly shows how arrogant Sandy is. Instead of listening to SpongeBob's real concern and fear, she makes a joke that basically calls him a coward. She's not taking the situation seriously because she doesn't take SpongeBob seriously. She sees him as weak and scared, so she assumes his warnings are just him being a baby. Throughout their whole trip to find the worm, Sandy keeps cutting SpongeBob off and refusing to listen to his warnings. When he tries to explain that she doesn't know what she's dealing with, Sandy gets annoyed and forces him to agree that there ain't nothing too big or too ornery for her to catch. She literally makes him say that she can handle anything, which shows how much she needs everyone to admit she's superior. When Sandy first fights what she thinks is the worm, she beats it easily and comes out bragging about how no worm is a match for me, because she's from Texas. She's so proud of herself and so sure she's amazing that she doesn't even think she might be wrong about what she fought. The funny part comes when SpongeBob has to tell her that what she fought was just the worm's tongue, and the real worm is huge beyond anything she imagined. But even then, Sandy only admits she was wrong because she's literally looking at a monster that could eat her in one bite. She doesn't actually learn anything about being humble or listening to others. Texas shows another side of Sandy's arrogance, her belief that her way of life is better than everyone else's. When Sandy gets homesick and starts talking about Texas, she doesn't just miss her home. She acts like Texas is obviously better than anywhere else, especially Bikini Bottom. Sandy talks about Texas like it's the prettiest place on earth and acts like living underwater is beneath her. Her song about wanting to go home is dismissive of her current life and friends. She's basically saying that nothing in Bikini Bottom could ever compare to Texas. When SpongeBob and Patrick try to cheer her up by making Texas-themed decorations and food, Sandy's first reaction is to laugh at their efforts. She doesn't appreciate that her friends tried to help. She finds their attempts funny because they don't match her superior Texas standards. Even when she decides to stay, it feels more like she's doing Bikini Bottom a favor rather than really appreciating her friends. The most telling part of this episode is how Sandy reacts when Patrick calls Texas dumb. She doesn't just get upset. She gets violently angry and chases them across town. This shows that Sandy's Texas pride is arrogance. She can't stand the idea that anyone would dare criticize something she thinks is perfect. Sandy's reaction is completely crazy. She's willing to physically hurt her friends because they said something bad about her home state. This is someone who thinks her way of life is so superior that any criticism deserves violence. She can't handle anyone having a different opinion about Texas because she really believes it's the best place on earth. Sandy's rocket shows how Sandy's arrogance affects her science work and decision making. When Sandy builds a rocket to go to the moon, she treats it like she's the only person smart enough to understand space travel. She talks down to SpongeBob throughout the episode, acting like his questions and excitement are annoying distractions from her serious science. Sandy's attitude towards SpongeBob in this episode is incredibly condescending. When he asks if they can hunt aliens on the moon, she doesn't just say no. She talks to him like he's a stupid kid who believes in fairy tales. She says, "Aliens? Are you nuts?" Then lectures him about how he doesn't know the first thing about outer space. This is really arrogant, because Sandy is making assumptions about what exists in space based on limited experience. She's been to the moon before, but that doesn't make her an expert on all possible life in the universe. Yet she speaks like she knows everything for sure, dismissing SpongeBob's ideas without any real thought. Sandy's arrogance in this episode also shows in how she handles the rocket itself. She acts like she's the only person who can operate it safely, but then SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally launch it and have a successful space adventure. Her assumption that she's the only competent person around turns out to be wrong, but she never admits this. Sandy's arrogance constantly hurts her relationships with other people. In Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm, her dismissive attitude towards SpongeBob's warnings puts both of them in serious danger. If she had listened to him from the beginning, she might have been more careful and avoided nearly getting eaten by a giant monster. Her condescending way of talking to people makes them feel small and stupid. When Sandy talks down to SpongeBob about aliens or Texas or anything else, she's not just sharing information. She's showing that she thinks she's smarter and better than him. This kind of behavior hurts friendships and makes people not want to share their thoughts or concerns. Sandy's arrogance also makes her a terrible teammate. In crisis situations, she assumes she should be in charge because she's the most capable person around. She doesn't ask for input from others or think that they might have valuable ideas. This means she misses out on important information and makes decisions based on incomplete understanding. In Sandy's SpongeBob and the Worm, SpongeBob actually has crucial information about the worm's size and danger level, but Sandy won't listen to him because she assumes he's just being weak. Her arrogance literally stops her from getting information that could save her life. Sandy's arrogance also stops her from growing as a person because she thinks she's already better than everyone around her. She doesn't see any need to learn from others or change her behavior. In episode after episode, Sandy makes the same mistakes, ignoring others' input, overestimating her own abilities, and assuming she knows better than everyone else. The worst part about Sandy's arrogance is that it's often disguised as being helpful. She acts like she's doing people a favor by taking charge and solving their problems, but really she's just feeding her own ego. She likes being the person everyone depends on because it confirms her belief that she's better than everyone else. In Texas, Sandy doesn't appreciate her friend's efforts to cheer her up because she's focused on how their attempts don't measure up to the real Texas standards. Instead of seeing their kindness and effort, she sees how they're not good enough to compare to her superior knowledge of Texas culture. Sandy's arrogance also makes her a hypocrite. She constantly criticizes Bikini Bottom and its residents for being weird or not good enough, but she gets violently angry when anyone says anything bad about Texas. She expects everyone to respect her preferences and background while showing no respect for theirs. Sandy's arrogance often makes situations worse rather than better. Her overconfidence leads her to take unnecessary risks, dismiss important warnings, and push away people that could help her. In Sandy's SpongeBob and the Worm, her arrogance nearly gets her killed and puts SpongeBob in danger too. Sandy represents a common problem with really capable people, thinking that being good at some things makes you better than other people at everything. Her intelligence and physical abilities are real strengths, but she uses them as reasons to look down on others rather than to help and support her community. The sad irony is that Sandy's arrogance often undermines the very ability she's so proud of. Her scientific work suffers when she won't listen to other perspectives. Her problem solving gets worse when she dismisses important information. Her physical courage becomes reckless when she won't acknowledge real dangers. If Sandy could learn to respect other people's intelligence and value their input, she could be an even better scientist and friend. Her skills combined with real humility and teamwork could make her incredibly effective. But as long as she keeps her arrogant attitude, she'll continue to create unnecessary problems and miss opportunities to truly help others. Sandy's arrogance is a big problem with how she sees herself compared to other people. Until she learns that being smart and capable doesn't make her better than others, she'll continue to be a condescending friend who creates more problems than she solves. Her intelligence could be a gift to her community, but her arrogance turns it into a wall that keeps her separated from the people who care about her. Sandy's arrogance causes problems, just like Plankton's obsession does. Plankton is so obsessed with the Krabby Patty formula that it's completely ruined his life. While fans think Plankton is a funny villain or feel bad for him, the truth is way worse. His obsession has taken over everything. He'll destroy friendships, hurt innocent people, and throw away any chance at happiness just to get that formula. He's not even a real person anymore. He's just a tiny green ball of obsession walking around. Plankton shows us where Plankton's obsession started and how messed up his thinking already is. In this episode, Plankton doesn't just want the formula. He thinks getting it will magically fix all of his problems and make him successful. He's built his whole identity around this one goal, and now he can't see any other way to be happy or successful. Throughout the episode, Plankton tries scheme after scheme to get the formula, and each one gets more desperate. He starts with a basic robot, then tries mind control, and finally decides to crawl inside SpongeBob's brain. Every time he fails, he gets more frantic and obsessed, showing that he literally can't handle failure or moving on from anything. What's really messed up about Plankton in this episode is how he sees SpongeBob. He doesn't think of SpongeBob as a person with feelings. He sees him as either an obstacle or a tool to use. When Plankton gets inside SpongeBob's brain, he's basically violating SpongeBob's mind and body, and he doesn't even care how wrong that is. His obsession has made him so focused on his goal that he stopped caring about other people completely. The episode also shows how Plankton's obsession has made him totally delusional. He really believes that stealing the formula will make him successful, but he never thinks that maybe his restaurant sucks because the food is bad or because he's awful to be around. His obsession has blinded him to the real reasons why he's failing and made him think there's some magical solution instead of just getting better at what he does. Plankton's army shows how dark Plankton's obsession has gotten by proving he'll manipulate his own family for his schemes. When Plankton Plankton gets his relatives to help steal the formula, he's not asking family for help. He's using them as tools. He doesn't care about what they want or if they get hurt. He only cares about how they can help him get what he wants. The way Plankton talks to his family in this episode shows how his obsession has poisoned every relationship he has. He doesn't talk to them like relatives he loves. He talks to them like employees or soldiers in his war against Mr. Krabs. His obsession has made it impossible for him to connect with anyone, because he only sees people as useful or not useful to his schemes. What makes this episode really sad is seeing how Plankton's obsession has pushed away his own family. His relatives clearly don't respect him or take him seriously, and you can tell that years of his constant scheming has driven them away. He's given up real relationships for his pointless quest, and now even his family thinks he's a joke. The episode also shows how Plankton's obsession has made him terrible at planning and leading. When his family finally agrees to help him, his plan falls apart immediately because he's so focused on the end goal that he doesn't think through the details. His obsession has made him impatient and sloppy, which is probably why his schemes always fail. The Algae's Always Greener shows just how deep Plankton's obsession goes by showing what happens when he actually gets what he thinks he wants. When Plankton switches lives with Mr. Krabs using his machine, he finally gets control of the Krusty Krab and can access the formula. But instead of being happy, he immediately finds out that running the restaurant is way harder than he thought, and having the formula doesn't automatically make him successful. This episode is really important because it proves that Plankton's obsession itself has become the point. Even when he gets everything he says he wants, he's still miserable because his obsession has destroyed his ability to enjoy anything. He can't appreciate finally getting his goal because the obsession has become more important to him than actually achieving it. The episode also shows how Plankton's obsession has left him completely unprepared for real success. When he's running the Krusty Krab, he has no idea how to manage employees, serve customers, or keep the business running. He's wasted decades obsessing over stealing the formula instead of learning the skills he'd actually need to run a successful restaurant. What's most telling about this episode is how quickly Plankton wants to get back to his old life. Even though he has everything he thought he wanted, he realizes that the obsession itself was what gave his life meaning. Without the chase and the scheming, he doesn't know who he is or what to do. His obsession has become so much a part of who he is that he can't exist without it. Plankton's obsession has completely destroyed his relationship with Karen, his wife. Throughout the series, we see how his single-minded focus on the formula has made him ignore or take for granted the person who actually cares about him. Karen consistently helps him with his schemes, gives him advice, and supports him, but Plankton barely notices because he's so focused on his goal. The really sad thing about Plankton and Karen's relationship is that she represents everything he says he wants. Someone who believes in him, supports his dreams, and wants him to succeed. But his obsession has made him blind to this. He treats Karen like a servant instead of a partner, and he never seems to realize that she's the one good thing in his life. Plankton's obsession has also made him a terrible businessman. Instead of focusing on improving his own restaurant, making better food, or learning real business skills, he's wasted decades on pointless schemes to steal everyone else's success. His obsession has made him reactive instead of proactive. He's always responding to what Mr. Krabs has instead of building something of his own. The most damaging thing about Plankton's obsession is how it stopped him from growing or changing as a person. Every failure should teach him something, but Plankton never learns from his mistakes because he's convinced that the only problem is that he hasn't stolen the formula yet. His obsession has made him unable to look at himself honestly or improve as a person. Plankton's obsession also hurts innocent people who get caught up in his schemes. SpongeBob especially suffers constantly from Plankton's attempts to use him or manipulate him. Plankton never thinks about how his actions affect SpongeBob or feels bad about the harm he causes. His obsession has made him completely selfish and thoughtless. The saddest part about Plankton is that his obsession has made him miss out on what could have been a good life. He's clearly smart and creative. His inventions and schemes show real talent and technical skill. If he put that energy into building his own success instead of stealing someone else's, he could probably create something really valuable. Plankton's obsession has also made him paranoid and bitter. He sees enemies everywhere and thinks everyone is plotting against him. This paranoia has isolated him even more and made it impossible for him to have healthy relationships or find peace. He's stuck in a cycle of suspicion and anger that his obsession created and keeps going. Maybe most importantly, Plankton's obsession has stolen his ability to enjoy simple things or feel satisfied with small wins. He's so focused on the big goal that he can't appreciate anything else in life. This has made him constantly unhappy and unable to feel good about anything he does accomplish. Plankton shows what happens when you let one goal or desire take over your entire life. His obsession shows how chasing one thing can destroy everything else that makes life worth living. relationships, personal growth, happiness, and peace of mind. He's become a warning about what happens when wanting something becomes more important than actually living your life. The really sad thing is that Plankton could still turn things around and build a better life, but his obsession makes him unwilling to try anything else. He's so invested in his current path that admitting it's wrong would feel like admitting his whole life has been wasted. So, he keeps doing the same destructive things over and over, making sure he'll never find the success and happiness he says he wants. Until Plankton can let go of his obsession with the Krabby Patty formula and start focusing on building his own success, having real relationships, and finding meaning beyond his rivalry with Mr. Krabs, he'll stay trapped in this cycle of failure and misery. His obsession is stopping him from wanting anything good in the first place.
Now let's talk about every SpongeBob character's saddest moment. Make sure to subscribe if you're liking our video so far.
SpongeBob SquarePants is probably one of the happiest characters ever created. This yellow sponge lives in a pineapple under the sea and finds joy in literally everything. He loves his job flipping burgers, he gets excited about jellyfishing, and he treats everyone like his best friend. SpongeBob is pure optimism wrapped up in SquarePants. But that's exactly what makes his sad moments so devastating. When someone who's always happy finally breaks down, it hits different. Have You Seen This Snail from Season 4 is hands down one of the most emotionally devastating episodes ever made. Man, this episode hits different. Like, we've all seen SpongeBob be goofy and make mistakes, but this time he really messed up bad. So, here's what happens. SpongeBob gets this paddle ball set from Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. There's this challenge where you have to hit the ball like 30 trillion times in a row or something crazy like that. SpongeBob becomes completely obsessed with it. We're talking full addiction mode here. Gary keeps trying to get his attention because, he's hungry. His food bowl is literally empty, but SpongeBob just keeps telling him to go away. Gary even jumps on his face trying to get noticed, and SpongeBob throws him off and yells at him to leave him alone. That's when you know something's wrong, because SpongeBob never yells at Gary like that. Gary gets so desperate he starts eating the crumbs left in his bowl, but there's literally nothing there except spiders. Spiders! That's how neglected this poor snail is. So Gary does what any of us would do. He packs his stuff and leaves. He actually writes a goodbye note saying he's going to find someone who remembers to feed him. The really heartbreaking part comes when Patrick shows up days later. Days. SpongeBob has been playing paddleball for a whole week, maybe 10 days, and he hasn't noticed Gary is gone. When he finally realizes, you can see the exact moment his heart breaks. His eyes filled with tears, and he starts searching everywhere, calling Gary's name with this desperate voice that just cuts right through you. But here's where the episode becomes legendary in terms of sadness. They play this song called Gary Come Home while showing SpongeBob and Patrick putting up missing posters all over town. The lyrics are simple but devastating. SpongeBob is basically admitting he was blind, that he messed up, and begging Gary to forgive him. Meanwhile, Gary is with this old lady who's trying to fatten him up to eat him, which is terrifying but also shows how far Gary had to go just to find someone who would feed him. The song hits so hard because it's not just about a pet running away. It's about realizing you took someone for granted. We've all been there, too busy with work, games, or whatever to pay attention to the people or pets who matter most. Then, when they're gone, you realize how much you need them. What makes this even sadder is seeing SpongeBob completely fall apart. At the Krusty Krab, he's crying into the Krabby Patties. He can't function. Mr. Krabs tries to help, but doesn't really understand what's happening. SpongeBob keeps saying things like he disappointed someone who was hungry, and you can tell he's eating himself up with guilt. The airplane scene where they write Gary Come Home in the sky, but it gets messed up and says something else instead, that's when you know SpongeBob is really desperate. He's trying everything and nothing is working. Then there's this moment where SpongeBob is talking to a billboard with Gary's picture on it. He's literally having a conversation with a sign because he misses Gary so much. He says he took Gary for granted and just wants to tell him he loves him one more time. That's when Gary finally shows up, and SpongeBob just breaks down completely. The reunion is beautiful, but also kind of funny because Gary is super full from the old lady overfeeding him. When SpongeBob says Gary must be starving, Gary just groans like, actually, I'm stuffed. This episode works because every pet owner has felt that fear of losing their companion, and every pet owner has probably had moments where they were too busy to give their pet the attention they deserved. SpongeBob's guilt feels real because it comes from a real place. The Gary Come Home song became iconic for a reason. It perfectly captures that feeling of regret and desperation when you realize you've hurt someone you love. The melody is simple enough that it sticks in your head, but the emotions behind it are complex and painful. What's really genius about this episode is how it shows that even the happiest, most optimistic character can experience real depression and guilt, and SpongeBob is devastated. He stops functioning normally. That's what real grief looks like, and seeing it in a cartoon somehow makes it even more powerful, not less. The episode also shows how easy it is to get distracted by random things and forget what really matters. SpongeBob gets so caught up in this meaningless game that he completely ignores his best friend. It's a lesson we all need to hear sometimes. This moment stands out because it breaks the formula. SpongeBob is usually the one cheering everyone else up, but here he's the one who needs help. Seeing him broken and desperate makes you realize how much you care about this fictional sponge. And that's the power of good storytelling, even in a cartoon about talking sea creatures. SpongeBob hurting Gary was sad, but Patrick turning on him in I'm with Stupid is way worse. Patrick Star is SpongeBob's best friend and next-door neighbor. And honestly, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. This pink starfish lives under a rock, literally and figuratively. Patrick is usually harmless in his stupidity, just a lazy guy who loves sleeping and eating. He's loyal to SpongeBob and genuinely cares about him, even if he doesn't always show it in the smartest ways. Patrick represents that friend we all have, who means well but sometimes says the wrong thing. He's simple, innocent, and usually pretty sweet. That's what makes his betrayal in I'm with Stupid so shocking and painful to watch. Patrick from I'm with Stupid is probably one of the most uncomfortable episodes to watch because it shows how easily friendship can turn toxic. This episode hits different because it's not about some external villain or crazy situation. It's about Patrick betraying his best friend. And the worst part is he doesn't even realize he's doing it. So Patrick gets this letter from his parents saying they're coming to visit for Starfish Day. He's freaking out because his parents think he's dumb as rocks, which, let's be honest, Patrick usually is, but that's beside the point. He's genuinely upset about disappointing them again. SpongeBob, being the good friend he is, comes up with this plan. He'll pretend to be even dumber than Patrick, so Patrick looks smart by comparison. It's actually a pretty sweet gesture. SpongeBob puts on his karate helmet to look stupid and starts acting like a complete moron. At first, everything goes according to plan. SpongeBob acts like he doesn't know how to shake hands. He runs into his own house. He makes weird animal noises. Patrick's fake parents start thinking Patrick is pretty smart for keeping this dummy in line. Patrick is loving the attention and praise from his parents. But then something really ugly happens. Patrick starts getting carried away with the whole thing. He begins making personal attacks on SpongeBob that go way beyond what they planned. He calls SpongeBob's clothes stupid, makes fun of his body shape, and even asks if he can borrow SpongeBob's mascara to embarrass him further. The fake parents are eating this up, laughing at every mean joke Patrick makes. And Patrick just keeps going. He's getting addicted to feeling superior and making his parents laugh. You can see SpongeBob's face getting more and more hurt with each insult. Then comes the really heartbreaking part. SpongeBob tries to talk to Patrick privately in the kitchen. He asks Patrick to ease up on the insults because they're actually hurting his feelings. But Patrick has completely forgotten this is all an act. He genuinely believes SpongeBob is stupid now. Patrick tells SpongeBob that dumb people don't realize how dumb they are. He's completely bought into his own performance. When SpongeBob reminds him about their plan, Patrick thinks SpongeBob is making it up. He talks down to SpongeBob like he's talking to a child or a pet. SpongeBob gets so frustrated that he takes off his helmet and tries to prove he's actually smart. He confesses everything to Patrick's fake parents, explains the whole plan, shows them he can do math and speak in complete sentences. But they just think Patrick taught him all this stuff in 3 minutes. The parents keep praising Patrick for training SpongeBob so well. Patrick just goes along with it, taking credit for teaching SpongeBob how to talk and think. SpongeBob is desperate trying to prove his intelligence, but nobody believes him. What makes this so sad is watching SpongeBob realize that his best friend is completely turned on him. Patrick really thinks SpongeBob is beneath him. The betrayal is real, and SpongeBob can see it in Patrick's eyes. SpongeBob finally snaps and crashes through the wall to escape. He can't take being treated like an idiot by his own best friend anymore. The whole thing drives him to a mental breakdown. The twist ending where Patrick realizes these aren't his real parents makes it even worse. All this cruelty and betrayal was for nothing. Patrick put SpongeBob through emotional torture to impress 2 random strangers who don't even have a son. This episode is uncomfortable because it shows how quickly power can corrupt someone. Patrick gets a tiny taste of feeling superior and it goes straight to his head. He becomes genuinely mean and condescending. The sweet, loyal Patrick we know disappears completely. It all shows how peer pressure can make you do terrible things to people you love. Patrick wants his parents' approval so badly that he's willing to humiliate his best friend. When the fake parents start laughing at SpongeBob, Patrick joins in because it feels good to be part of the group. What's really disturbing is how Patrick starts believing his own lies. He gets so caught up in playing the smart one that he forgets it's all fake. His brain basically rewrites reality to make him feel better about himself. The episode doesn't really have a satisfying resolution either. Patrick's real parents show up and everything goes back to normal, but there's no apology to SpongeBob. Patrick never acknowledges how badly he treated his friend. SpongeBob just disappears from the episode after his breakdown. This makes it feel like one of the few SpongeBob episodes where the friendship feels genuinely damaged. Usually when they fight, it's over silly misunderstandings, but this time Patrick revealed something ugly about his character. He showed that under the right circumstances, he's willing to throw SpongeBob under the bus. This episode works because everyone has experienced this kind of betrayal. We've all had friends who changed when they got around certain people. Or maybe we've been the Patrick, getting so caught up in fitting in that we hurt someone we care about. It's a surprisingly mature storyline for a kid's show. Most cartoons would have Patrick realize his mistake and apologize, but this episode just lets the betrayal hang there, unresolved and painful. Sometimes, friendship isn't enough to overcome selfishness and insecurity. Patrick's betrayal showed how cruel a best friend can be, but Squidward's pain shows that being unseen and unappreciated cuts even deeper. Squidward Tentacles is probably the most miserable character in all of SpongeBob. This grumpy octopus lives between SpongeBob and Patrick, which is basically his personal version of hell. Squidward thinks he's an artist and an intellectual, but the world keeps reminding him that he's just a cashier at a fast food restaurant. He's bitter, sarcastic, and always getting the short end of the stick. Squidward represents that part of all of us that feels unappreciated and stuck in life. That's what makes his rare moments of genuine pain so heartbreaking. Band Geeks is probably the biggest emotional roller coaster Squidward ever goes through. This episode starts with Squidward getting a call from his old high school rival, Squilliam Fancyson. This guy is everything Squidward wishes he could be. Rich, successful, talented, and he never lets Squidward forget it. Squilliam calls to brag about how his fancy band is supposed to play at the Bubble Bowl, which is basically the Super Bowl of their world. Then he casually mentions that his band can't make it and asks if Squidward's band can fill in. Of course, Squidward doesn't have a band, but his pride kicks in and he lies, saying he totally has one. So now Squidward has to create a marching band from scratch in like a week. He puts up flyers around town and gets a bunch of random people to show up. The problem is, none of these people know how to play instruments. At all. The whole experience is just Squidward getting humiliated over and over. When he asks if anyone has musical experience, Plankton asks if torture instruments count, and Patrick asks if mayonnaise is an instrument. These people are hopeless, and Squidward knows it. Every practice session is a disaster. On day 1, the drummers literally shoot their drumsticks out of their mouths and pin Squidward to the wall. Sandy beats up Patrick and stuffs him inside a trombone. On day 2, the flag twirlers spin so hard they fly into a blimp and die in an explosion. Day 3. Plankton nearly passes out trying to play a harmonica that's bigger than his entire body. By day 4, Squidward is desperate. He tells everyone to play really loud, thinking that might help somehow. The result is so bad it breaks all the windows and deforms Squidward's face. Then, when he suggests playing quietly instead, everyone starts arguing and breaks into a massive fight. But here's where the episode gets really sad. After the fight ends, Squidward has a complete breakdown. He tells everyone they crushed his one chance at happiness. He says he expected better from them, but he admits he's probably a loser for even hoping. Then, he tells them not to bother showing up because he'll just say they all died in a marching accident. This moment hits so hard because you can see how much this meant to Squidward. This wasn't just showing off to Squilliam. This was about proving to himself that he could accomplish something meaningful. Squidward spends his whole life feeling like a failure, and this was his shot at redemption. What makes it worse is how alone he feels. Nobody takes him seriously. They all treat him like a joke while Squidward is pouring his heart into it. When he breaks down, you realize how much pressure he was putting on himself and how scared he was at failing again. The really tragic part is Squidward's speech about expecting better from everyone. He's not just talking about the band, he's talking about his whole life. Squidward constantly gets let down by the world around him, and this feels like the final straw. SpongeBob tries to rally everyone by asking them to remember all the times that Squidward helped them, but nobody can think of any examples. They literally can't remember a single time Squidward was there for them. That's brutal. It shows how invisible and unappreciated Squidward really is. The next day at the Bubble Bowl, Squidward is ready to admit defeat. He's planning to cancel everything and accept the humiliation. When Squilliam shows up just to watch him fail, you can see Squidward die a little inside. This guy came all the way just to enjoy Squidward's embarrassment. Then, the band shows up in full uniform, and Squidward realizes he has to go through with it. As they're getting ready to perform, Squidward is convinced this will be the worst moment of his life. He's sweating, shaking, just waiting for the disaster to happen. But then, something magical occurs. The band actually sounds incredible. They perform this epic rock song called Sweet Victory, and it's absolutely amazing. The crowd goes wild. Squilliam faints from shock, and Squidward finally gets his moment of triumph. What makes this so powerful is how much Squidward suffered to get there. His victory feels earned because we saw him at his lowest point. We saw him give up hope completely. When he finally succeeds, it means everything because failure seems so certain. The episode works because everyone has almost felt like Squidward at some point. We've all had dreams that seemed impossible and people who didn't believe in us. We've all had moments where we wondered if we were just kidding ourselves about our talents or potential. Squidward's breakdown is so real because it comes from a place of genuine pain. He's not just being dramatic or selfish. He's a guy who's been beaten down by life over and over, and this felt like his last chance to matter. When it seemed like that chance was gone, he completely fell apart. The triumph at the end is beautiful, but it doesn't erase the sadness of what came before. Squidward had to go through hell to get this moment of glory, and knowing Squidward's luck, he probably went right back to being miserable the next day. But for that one moment, he got to feel like he accomplished something special. Squidward shows us what it's like to be invisible and unloved, but Mr. Krabs proves that being seen means nothing if all you care about is money. If you're enjoying our video so far, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Eugene Krabs is the greediest character in all of SpongeBob. This red crab owns the Krusty Krab restaurant and will do literally anything for money. He pays his employees almost nothing, overcharges for everything, and treats money like it's more important than people. Mr. Krabs represents capitalism at its worst, where profit matters more than human decency. He's usually seen as a funny character, but sometimes his greed gets so extreme that it becomes genuinely disturbing. That's exactly what happens in this episode. Born Again Krabs starts with Mr. Krabs being his usual cheap self. SpongeBob finds an old, moldy Krabby Patty under the grill and tries to throw it away, but Mr. Krabs stops him because selling that rotten patty would make him 5.2 cents. He actually has an alarm system to prevent food from being thrown away. That's how obsessed he is with money. Mr. Krabs forces SpongeBob to serve this disgusting patty to customers. The thing is so old and gross that it's literally growing mold and making animal noises. Customers run away screaming when they see it. The Krusty Krab loses all its business for weeks, but Mr. Krabs still won't throw the patty away. Finally, to prove the patty is fine, Mr. Krabs eats it himself. Big mistake. He immediately gets food poisoning and ends up in the hospital, turning green from how sick he is. Even as he's being wheeled into the ambulance, he tells SpongeBob to save the rest of the patty because he's not done with it yet. In the hospital, the Flying Dutchman shows up to take Mr. Krabs to Davy Jones' locker, which is basically hell for sea creatures. Mr. Krabs tries to lie about his name, but the Flying Dutchman sees right through it. He says Mr. Krabs has to go because being cheap is a terrible thing. Mr. Krabs breaks down crying and begs for another chance. The Flying Dutchman agrees, but only if Mr. Krabs promises to always be generous and never cheap again. Mr. Krabs swears he'll change. When Mr. Krabs returns to the Krusty Krab, he really does seem different. He gives out free toys, free refills, and treats his employees well. He even turns his office into an employee lounge for Squidward to nap in. For a while, it looks like he actually learned his lesson. But then, reality hits. Mr. Krab gets a credit card bill for $10,000 and realizes he has no money to pay it. When SpongeBob and Squidward tell him he's actually awake and not dreaming, Mr. Krabs completely snaps. His head literally cracks open from the shock. Immediately, all his generosity disappears. He starts taking back the free sodas, confiscating toys from kids, and even erasing a customer's memory of a movie he was watching. When he sees a customer reaching for a penny on the ground, Mr. Krabs grabs the guy's arms and threatens to rip them off if he doesn't let go. That's when the Flying Dutchman comes back, furious that Mr. Krab broke his promise. He's ready to drag Mr. Krabs to eternal punishment when SpongeBob steps in to defend his boss. SpongeBob insists that Mr. Krabs is generous and would never sell him out for money. The Flying Dutchman decides to test this. He offers Mr. Krabs a choice between SpongeBob and all the money in his pocket. Mr. Krabs asks how much they're talking about. When the Flying Dutchman says 62 cents, Mr. Krabs immediately takes the money without hesitation. This moment is absolutely brutal. SpongeBob's face shows complete shock and heartbreak. This is his boss, someone he looks up to and cares about, literally selling his soul for pocket change. Not even a lot of money, just 62 cents. Less than $1. What makes it worse is how casual Mr. Krabs is about it. He doesn't even hesitate or feel bad. He just grabs the money like it's the most natural thing in the world. When Squidward asks how he could trade SpongeBob for 62 cents, Mr. Krabs asks if he could have gotten more. The Flying Dutchman takes SpongeBob to Davy Jones's locker, leaving Mr. Krabs counting his coins. But then Squidward really lets him have it. He tells Mr. Krabs he should be ashamed of himself for selling out someone who stuck up for him. That's when Mr. Krabs finally realizes what he's done. Mr. Krabs breaks down crying, saying he doesn't want the money anymore and just wants SpongeBob back. Luckily, the Flying Dutchman returns SpongeBob because he was too annoying to keep around. But the damage is done. We've seen how far Mr. Krabs will go for money. This episode is just dark because it shows Mr. Krabs at his absolute worst. Most of the time, his greed is treated like a joke, but here, it crosses a line into something genuinely evil. He literally sold his employee's soul for loose change. What makes it sadder is SpongeBob's reaction. Even after being betrayed like that, SpongeBob tries to make excuses for Mr. Krabs. He says Mr. Krabs did it for the Krusty Krab and that he would have done the same thing. But when Mr. Krabs asks if he really would have, SpongeBob quietly says no. The episode works because it shows how addiction to money can corrupt someone completely. Mr. Krabs had a genuine spiritual awakening and really wanted to change, but the moment money was involved, all his good intentions went out the window. His greed is literally stronger than his love for the people around him. This moment also reveals how SpongeBob sees the relationship versus how Mr. Krabs sees it. SpongeBob thinks they're friends and that Mr. Krabs values him as a person, but to Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob is just an employee who can be replaced if the price is right. The really sad part is that this probably damaged their relationship forever. Even though Mr. Krabs apologized and got SpongeBob back, how do you trust someone again after they sell your soul for 62 cents? SpongeBob might forgive him, but he'll never forget about what Mr. Krabs is really capable of. The episode ends with them laughing together, but there's something hollow about it. You know that SpongeBob will never look at Mr. Krabs the same way again, and Mr. Krabs will probably go right back to being greedy the next day. Some people never really change, no matter how many chances they get. Mr. Krabs proves that selling out someone you care about takes less than $1, but Sandy shows that losing your sense of self can cost you everything. Sandy Cheeks is probably the toughest character in all of SpongeBob. This squirrel from Texas lives underwater in a diving suit and air helmet, which makes her pretty unique. Sandy is smart, strong, and never backs down from a fight. She's a scientist, a martial artist, and basically good at everything she tries. Sandy represents independence and confidence. She's the character who always has her act together. That's what makes seeing her completely helpless and humiliated so hard to watch. Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy is honestly one of the most uncomfortable episodes to sit through. This whole thing starts because Plankton is trying another scheme to steal the Krabby Patty formula. He hides inside a sesame seed on a burger bun, gets served to Sandy, and ends up trapped in her air helmet when she eats a patty. The episode reveals something we never knew about Sandy before. When she gets home to shower, she literally peels off her fur like it's a costume. Underneath, she's just a pink hairless body wearing purple underwear. Her fur is actually a removable pelt that she hangs up like clothing. Plankton sees this and gets an idea. While Sandy is showering and singing happily, he steals her fur pelt and locks her in the bathroom. Then he takes the fur to the chum bucket, puts some robot controls in it, and uses it to impersonate Sandy at the Krusty Krab. Meanwhile, Sandy finishes her shower and realizes her fur is gone. She breaks down the bathroom door and puts a coffee pot on her head as a makeshift helmet. Then she runs out into Bikini Bottom to find whoever stole her fur, wearing nothing but her underwear. This is where the episode gets really sad. Sandy is completely exposed and vulnerable in a way we've never seen before. She's this proud, confident character who's suddenly been stripped of everything that makes her feel secure. Without her fur and her suit, she looks completely different and everyone treats her like a freak. The townspeople start pointing and laughing at her. They call her a hairless goat, a nudist ferret, and a naked chipmunk. Kids run away screaming, parents cover their children's eyes, and everyone treats her like she's some kind of monster. Sandy tries to explain that her fur was stolen, but nobody listens or cares. What makes this so heartbreaking is seeing Sandy's confidence completely shattered. This is a character who's usually fearless and in control, but now she's running around desperately trying to cover herself and hide from people. She tries to make a skirt out of seaweed, but it falls apart and leaves her even more exposed. The really sad part is when Sandy realizes she can't catch the thief because everyone's staring at her. She says the real fur thief will see her coming a mile away because of all the attention, so she has to hide underground in the sewers, feeling completely defeated and hopeless. Sandy sits in those dark tunnels, talking to herself about how she needs help but doesn't know what to do. This is Sandy Cheeks, the character who usually helps everyone else solve their problems. Now she's hiding in the sewer because she's too embarrassed to show her face in public. The episode tries to make a joke out of it, but there's something genuinely disturbing about it. Sandy is being humiliated for something that's not her fault. She's the victim of a crime, but everyone treats her like she's the problem. Nobody stops to ask why she looks different or if she needs help. What's worse is that this episode reveals Sandy's biggest insecurity. Her fur isn't even real. She's been wearing what's basically a fursuit this entire time. That means every confident, tough moment we've seen from Sandy was while she was essentially in costume. Without it, she's just as vulnerable as anybody else. The episode also shows how quickly people can turn on you when you look different. These are the same townspeople who usually respect Sandy, but the moment she appears without her fur, they treat her like garbage. It's a pretty dark commentary on how society judges people based on their appearance. Even when Sandy finally catches Plankton and gets her fur back, the episode doesn't end well for her. The police show up and arrest her for public nudity instead of arresting Plankton for theft and identity fraud. Sandy ends up being the one who gets punished even though she was the victim. This episode works because everyone has felt exposed and vulnerable at some point. We've all had moments where we felt like everyone was staring at us and judging us. But Sandy's experience is extreme. She literally loses her identity and becomes a completely different person in everyone's eyes. The saddest part is realizing that Sandy's confidence might have been fake all along. If she needs a fursuit to feel strong and capable, what does that say about who she really is underneath? The episode suggests that even the toughest people have insecurities and that our identities might be more fragile than we think. Sandy's humiliation feels real because it goes beyond being just embarrassed. She loses her dignity, her identity, and her place in society all at once. When someone takes away the thing that makes you feel like yourself, it can destroy everything you thought you knew about who you were. Sandy loses her dignity and identity for simply being seen without a disguise, but Plankton loses his will to live because someone decided his worst fear was funny. Sheldon Plankton is usually the villain in SpongeBob. This tiny green organism spends his life trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula and put Mr. Krabs out of business. Plankton is evil, scheming, and completely obsessed with success. He's married to a computer named Karen who barely tolerates him. Most of the time, Plankton is treated as a joke because he's so small and his plans always fail. But he's still the bad guy, so when bad things happen to him, we're supposed to find him funny. That's what makes this episode so disturbing. One Course Meal is probably the darkest episode SpongeBob ever made. This whole thing starts when Plankton is trying another scheme to steal the Krabby Patty formula. He's got Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob trapped in a robot claw and is torturing them for information. Just when it looks like he might actually succeed, Pearl shows up. Plankton immediately panics and runs away screaming. Turns out he's terrified of whales because they ate his family members in the past. Mr. Krabs sees this and gets an idea that's way more evil than anything Plankton has ever done. Mr. Krabs decides to use Plankton's fear against him. He dresses up like Pearl and starts terrorizing Plankton for weeks. Not just once or twice, but constantly. For 16 straight days. Mr. Krabs torments this tiny creature who's already traumatized by a childhood memory of watching his family get eaten alive. The psychological warfare is relentless. Mr. Krabs shows up everywhere Plankton goes, popping up out of dumpsters, sneaking into his lab, and constantly threatening to eat him. He does perfect impressions of Pearl's voice and mannerisms, making the whole thing feel real to Plankton. Every time Plankton thinks he's safe, fake Pearl appears with her mouth open, ready to devour him. Plankton becomes completely paranoid and stops leaving the house. He grows out his hair and fingernails, wears tissue boxes as shoes, and basically becomes a hermit. He's having nightmares about being eaten by whales and can't function normally. Karen, his own wife, doesn't believe him and thinks he's going crazy. The nightmare sequence is particularly brutal. Plankton dreams about being swallowed by a demonic version of Pearl and landing in her stomach, where he finds his dead ancestors floating in gastric acid. His grandfather greets him cheerfully, like this is just a normal family reunion in hell. It's the kind of imagery you'd expect in a horror movie, not a kid's cartoon. The really messed up part is watching Plankton deteriorate mentally. This isn't the confident, scheming villain we're used to. He's a broken, terrified creature who can't even step outside without having a panic attack. Mr. Krabs is literally driving him crazy, and he's enjoying every second of it. What makes this so much worse is the power dynamic. Plankton is already the smallest, weakest character in the show. He poses no real threat to anyone, and his schemes always fail. Mr. Krabs is bigger, stronger, and has more resources. This isn't a fair fight between equals. It's a powerful bully systematically destroying someone who can't defend themselves. The episode also shows how trauma compounds over time. Plankton's original fear came from watching his family get murdered. Mr. Krabs is essentially forcing him to relive that trauma over and over again. Each fake Pearl encounter reinforces the original horror and makes the fear stronger. By the end, Plankton is completely consumed by terror. Then comes the moment that shocked everyone. Plankton walks out into the middle of the road and lies down, waiting for a bus to run him over. He's given up completely. He tells SpongeBob he's trying to get killed and asks SpongeBob to just step on him instead. Plankton, a character in a kid's cartoon, is actively trying to die. This scene is absolutely heartbreaking because you can see how much pain Plankton is in. He's not the evil mastermind anymore. He's just a broken little creature who wants the suffering to end. When SpongeBob asks what he's doing, Plankton says there's no point in going on because he'll just be tortured by the whale for the rest of his life. The way Plankton talks about this situation shows classic signs of severe depression. He's lost all hope, can't see any way out of the situation, and believes the pain will never end. His decision to lie on the road isn't impulsive. It's a calculated choice made by someone who's been pushed beyond their breaking point. What makes this even worse is that Mr. Krabs is shown laughing about it. He's sitting in his office, erasing a picture of Plankton and celebrating like he just won a game. To him, driving someone to lay in the street is funny. When SpongeBob tells him Plankton is lying in the street, Mr. Krabs just laughs harder and says he's a mess. SpongeBob is the only character who shows any compassion. He refuses to step on Plankton and later confronts Mr. Krabs about his behavior. But even SpongeBob doesn't fully understand how serious the situation is. He treats it like a prank gone too far instead of recognizing that someone is having a mental breakdown. The episode tries to justify Mr. Krabs' behavior by reminding us that SpongeBob accidentally revealed the location of the secret formula. But that doesn't excuse psychological torture. Protecting a sandwich recipe doesn't give you the right to drive someone to death. The punishment is completely disproportionate to the crime. This episode was heavily criticized by fans for being too dark and inappropriate for children. Many people felt it crossed a line by showing a character attempt something so extreme, even if it was played for comedy. The fact that it was Plankton, usually the villain, made it even more disturbing because it suggested that bad people deserve to suffer. What's really sad is how alone Plankton is throughout this whole ordeal. Karen doesn't believe him, Mr. Krabs is actively tormenting him, and everyone else just doesn't know or doesn't care. He has no support system and no one to turn to for help. That's a pretty realistic portrayal of how depression and trauma can isolate someone. The episode ends with SpongeBob saving Plankton from his own revenge plot, but there's no real resolution. Plankton doesn't get help for his trauma, Mr. Krabs doesn't face any consequences for his actions, and nothing changes. The whole experience was just pointless cruelty that almost ended in tragedy. This episode stands out because it shows how bullying can push someone over the edge. Mr. Krabs used Plankton's deepest fear against him repeatedly until it broke him completely. It's a sobering reminder that everyone has vulnerabilities, and using those vulnerabilities to hurt someone can have devastating consequences. The saddest part is that Plankton's fear comes from a real traumatic experience. His family was eaten by whales, which means he's dealing with genuine PTSD. Mr. Krabs took that trauma and weaponized it for his own amusement. That's not just cruel, it's evil in a way that makes Mr. Krabs seem worse than any villain Plankton has ever been.
Now we'll talk about what SpongeBob teaches us about happiness. Be sure to subscribe.
SpongeBob SquarePants is a cartoon character who stays happy no matter what bad things happen to him. His simple approach to life shows us real lessons about finding joy, even when everything goes wrong. That sounds too good to be true, right? Especially when most of us feel like we're dragging through the day. Bills to pay, jobs to stress about, people to deal with, and then there's this yellow sponge running around like life is always exciting. It feels unrealistic, but maybe that's the point. In the first episode ever made, Help Wanted, SpongeBob wakes up full of energy. He's not rich. He doesn't have big plans. He just wants to work at the Krusty Krab, a fast food place with a greasy grill and a grumpy cashier. But to him, that's more than enough. He gets out of bed smiling, makes breakfast, feeds his pet, and shouts, "I'm ready," before marching off with total excitement. That's the first clue. SpongeBob doesn't wait for something amazing to happen. He brings excitement with him, and when he gets to the Krusty Krab, things don't go smoothly. Mr. Krabs and Squidward both try to talk him out of applying. They send him on a fake mission to find a spatula that they assume doesn't exist. It's supposed to discourage him, but it doesn't work. He just takes it seriously and heads off like he's been handed the most important task in the world. And when he returns, with the spatula by the way, he ends up saving the restaurant from an angry crowd of anchovies and earns the job. The funny thing is, he was already happy before he got it. The job doesn't give him joy. It just gives him another place to use the joy he already had. That's a huge shift from how most people think. We usually tie happiness to rewards, good grades, promotions, praise, but SpongeBob flips the whole idea. He doesn't get excited because he succeeded. He succeeds because he stayed excited. It happens again in Tea at the Tree Dome, when he meets Sandy for the first time. She's friendly and interesting, and when she invites him over to her dome, he agrees right away. But there's a problem. Her home is filled with air, and SpongeBob, being a sea creature, can't breathe it. Instead of speaking up or making it awkward, he plays it off. He wants to make a new friend, and he's willing to deal with the discomfort if it means spending time with someone who matters. So he stays inside, gasping quietly, slowly drying out, pretending everything's fine. It's silly on the surface, but underneath, it's kind of beautiful. He doesn't complain or make it about him. He's just trying to be kind. And when he finally whispers, "I need it," referring to water, Sandy realizes what's happening and saves him just in time. He immediately gets back up and doesn't hold it against her. Again, SpongeBob shows something most people miss. Real happiness is about how far you'll go to stay kind. He just genuinely enjoys connecting with others, even when it's awkward or painful. That kind of joy is rare, because most of us only feel good when things are going our way. SpongeBob doesn't work like that. He feels joy even when people laugh at him, even when his body is cracking from dryness, even when he's ignored or underestimated. He's just made a choice to lead with positivity instead of fear. Now think about Squidward. In both of these episodes, he acts like SpongeBob's happiness is annoying. He rolls his eyes, makes snarky comments, tries to stay above it all. But if you look closely, his anger isn't really about SpongeBob doing anything wrong. It's more about what SpongeBob represents. Because if someone like SpongeBob can be happy doing something simple, then what's Squidward's excuse? That's the uncomfortable part. It's easier to think that happiness comes from being smarter, richer, or more respected. It's harder to accept that it might just come from being present and open and optimistic. SpongeBob doesn't need a fancy life. He just needs a reason to care, and he finds those everywhere. There's also something subtle going on in these moments. SpongeBob gets hurt. He feels left out. He struggles, just like anyone else. But he doesn't let those things close him off. He keeps showing up. He keeps trying. He keeps smiling. It's about staying hopeful, even when they're not. It's weird, right? In most stories, characters grow by gaining something. Wisdom, strength, confidence. But SpongeBob's power is that he doesn't need to change to be strong. He just needs to stay himself. And that might be the hardest thing to do. There's one moment in Help Wanted that stands out. After he's finished feeding the anchovies and cleaning up the mess, Mr. Krabs praises him. And instead of acting cocky or smug, SpongeBob just smiles bigger. He didn't need the praise to feel proud, but he's still grateful to hear it. That small moment shows the truth. SpongeBob doesn't look for happiness in the future. He brings it with him every step of the way. Most people wait for life to get better before they feel better. SpongeBob doesn't wait. He treats every moment like it already matters. That's what makes him different. And honestly, that's what makes him radical. Because he refuses to become bitter. And maybe that's what happiness really looks like. With just a sponge who keeps smiling even when the world doesn't give him a reason to. But before we continue the story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Some people say SpongeBob is happy because he's simple. But that's just a polite way of calling him dumb. It's the same thing people do in real life. When they don't understand how someone can stay joyful, they assume it's because that person hasn't seen enough pain or isn't smart enough to know better. But episodes like The Splinter and Squilliam Returns prove that SpongeBob doesn't avoid pain. He just refuses to let it rot his spirit. Let's start with The Splinter. It's one of the most physically uncomfortable episodes in the whole show. SpongeBob gets a splinter while working at the Krusty Krab. That's it. But the way he reacts, and the way everyone else does, turns that tiny piece of wood into something way bigger than it should be. At first, SpongeBob doesn't even realize it's serious. He brushes it off and keeps going, because he loves his job and doesn't want to let anyone down. But as the injury gets worse, swelling, oozing, getting infected, he still doesn't panic. He's clearly in pain. He's clearly struggling. But his focus is still on doing his job right. That's the first sign of what sets him apart. Most of us, when we're hurting, stop everything else. We make it the center of our day. We cancel plans, complain, look for sympathy. But SpongeBob does the opposite. He tries to hide it out of pride. He wants to keep being helpful. He wants to stay happy and keep the kitchen running. He's just choosing not to let his pain be the most important thing in the room. What's interesting is that everyone else around him assumes the worst. When Squidward finds out about the splinter, his first instinct is to use it as an excuse to get SpongeBob sent home. He sees SpongeBob's pain as a weakness, something to be used. He calls in the doctor, who's actually just Patrick pretending to be a medical expert. Patrick, of course, makes things worse. He slams a trash-filled garbage bag into the splinter, inflaming it even more. But SpongeBob doesn't blame anyone. He just keeps trying to push forward, even while he's in agony. It's absurd, but it's also honest. He doesn't want sympathy. He wants dignity. He wants to finish his shift. Here's where the episode really hits home for the audience. When Mr. Krabs finally removes the splinter, it's quick and painless. The real message here is often overlooked. Our fear of pain can cause more harm than the pain itself. SpongeBob could have spared himself a lot of unnecessary suffering if he'd spoken up sooner. But the point isn't that he should have. The point is that he chose to endure quietly. Not because he thought he deserved it, but because he believed it was more important to show up with a positive attitude. His happiness wasn't based on how easy things were, but on how much he still believed in what he was doing. Now compare that with Squilliam Returns. In this episode, Squidward lies to his rich rival Squilliam about being the manager of a 5-star restaurant. He ropes SpongeBob into the plan, thinking he can use him like a tool to impress Squilliam. But here's the twist. SpongeBob doesn't act like a tool. He becomes the heart of the whole operation. At first, Squidward tells him to forget everything except fine dining and breathing. That command would break most people. But not SpongeBob. He takes it so seriously that it flips a switch in his brain. He becomes a fully trained waiter with incredible skill and attention to detail. Because he cares so much about doing a job that he finds a way to do it. There's this one moment where the pressure is at its peak. The restaurant is packed. Squilliam is watching, smug and ready to destroy destroy Squidward's lie. Everything is on the verge of falling apart, but SpongeBob, who's been treated like a joke, saves it. He slides across the floor like a professional, clears the dishes, serves food, and manages the entire dining room with total grace. And here's what matters. He doesn't do it for credit. He just does it because it's what the job needs. People often mock SpongeBob for being obsessed with work. They say he's the ultimate corporate dream, someone who'll smile while being stepped on. But that's lazy analysis. SpongeBob is happy because he finds meaning in what he does, even when others don't. That's why he succeeds in situations like this. His joy doesn't come from winning. It comes from being fully present, from doing something with care, from showing up even when the spotlight isn't on him. It's also worth noting that Squidward, who's supposed to be the smart one, falls apart. He's so focused on appearances, on impressing someone else, that he forgets the basics. He forgets how to enjoy anything. That's the real reason he always fails, because he resents the idea that happiness can come from something simple. He sees SpongeBob as an idiot for being so joyful, but SpongeBob keeps proving that joy is just hard work. Both of these episodes build up to that truth in different ways. One puts SpongeBob in physical pain, the other puts him under emotional pressure. In both, he doesn't crack, because he has something most of us lose as we grow up: the belief that happiness is worth protecting, especially when life isn't easy. That's why these moments matter. Before we reach the big emotional conclusion in SpongeBob's story, we witness all these quiet, overlooked struggles. The pressure, the discomfort, the embarrassment. Yet, instead of giving into frustration, SpongeBob leans in even more. He laughs through the pain. He stays focused when others give up. And that's what truly makes the ultimate message land so powerfully. His joy is something he's truly earned. The next time you watch these SpongeBob episodes, don't just focus on what happens. Pay attention to what SpongeBob is fighting for: the simple right to keep being himself. And that, more than anything else, is what leads to his lesson on happiness. Everyone talks about happiness like it's something you find after everything finally works out, after the promotion, after the applause, after life starts making sense. But SpongeBob never waits for that. He doesn't need things to be fair. He just keeps showing up with the same kind of joy, whether he's cleaning a floor or singing in a stadium. And the reason that matters is because most of us don't live in epic moments. We live in the small, boring stuff in between. That's where SpongeBob lives too. He turns that into something worth showing up for. Nowhere is that clearer than in Band Geeks, one of the most rewatched episodes in SpongeBob history. It's about Squidward. For once, the story starts with him. He gets an unexpected call from his old rival, Squilliam, a smug, rich, overachieving version of everything Squidward wishes he could be. Squilliam offers him the chance to conduct at the Bubble Bowl, the biggest musical event in town. It sounds generous, but it's really a trap. Squilliam knows Squidward has no band, and Squidward, driven by years of insecurity and pride, lies and says he does. What follows is Squidward trying to turn a random group of townspeople into a working marching band in just a few days. It goes badly. Rehearsals are a mess, people fight, instruments break, nobody listens. Every time they meet, things get worse. Squidward can't control anyone, and his dreams start slipping through his fingers. What he's always wanted is finally in reach, and it's falling apart in slow motion. SpongeBob is just one of the people Squidward drags into the group, but from the beginning, his attitude is different. While everyone else yells and blames and threatens to quit, SpongeBob just keeps trying. He doesn't act like things are fine. He just shows up anyway. He doesn't treat the experience like a joke or a waste of time. He treats it like something that could become meaningful, even if no one else believes that yet. Eventually, the entire group gives up. After another failed practice turns into a brawl, Squidward finally breaks. His voice shakes as he tells everyone to forget it. He's humiliated. And this is the moment that could have ended everything. But instead, SpongeBob steps forward and says something simple. Let's do this for Squidward. He deserves to have something go right. That's it. That's the turning point. With just someone deciding to care when everyone else was ready to walk away. Then they practice in secret. We never see how. The episode skips over the training montage we expect, because this episode is about why they worked at all. On the day of the Bubble Bowl, Squidward shows up expecting to fail. That fear is all over his face. The band takes the field, the crowd waits, and Squidward's hands shake. He lifts the baton. Then the music begins. Sweet victory fills the stadium. The band is perfect. Uniforms polished, every note is sharp. SpongeBob steps forward as lead vocalist and delivers a performance that shocks everyone. His voice is strong, confident, and completely unexpected. But what's even more powerful is what he doesn't do. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't rub it in. He lets Squidward have the moment. And Squidward, for once, feels like he's flying. That final image of Squidward rising above the stadium with his arms spread wide is such a powerful moment. It's like all the hard work paid off, and for once, someone believed in him enough to make it happen. This episode is often remembered for its ending, but what really matters is how we got there. SpongeBob was the hero because he cared when no one else did. He didn't need the spotlight. He just wanted the performance to go right, and he gave everything he had to make it happen, even if no one noticed. That kind of joy doesn't come from being praised. It comes from helping something succeed that wasn't supposed to. SpongeBob's happiness grows in the background, in the quiet parts, in the effort no one sees. Now shift gears completely. From stadium lights to fluorescent bulbs, the Krusty Krab training video doesn't look like an emotional episode. It's a parody, a fake orientation video for new employees, with dramatic narration and cheesy music. But inside all that silliness is a deeper look at the kind of person SpongeBob really is, and why he finds joy in places most people avoid. The training video treats the Krusty Krab like a big deal. It explains the history, the rules, the customer service policies. It uses acronyms and charts. It even gives Squidward a section, showing what not to do. He's slouching, bored, rude to customers. It's exaggerated, but not that far from how most people at work feel. Then there's SpongeBob, wearing his hat like a crown, cleaning the floor like it matters, treating each customer like they're special. The narrator doesn't even need to say much. You see the difference instantly. SpongeBob looks proud to be there. Squidward looks trapped. And here's what's important. SpongeBob isn't acting like that because he's clueless. He knows what the job is. He knows how others see it. But he doesn't care. He just wants to do the work well. The narrator builds toward the ultimate mystery, the secret Krabby Patty formula. He teases it, drags it out, adds suspense. Right as he's about to reveal it, the video cuts to black. That moment is funny, but we've already seen what really holds it together. It's the guy behind the grill, the one who shows up early, works clean, and does it all with actual joy. SpongeBob is the thing holding the Krusty Krab together. This confuses people. Some say SpongeBob is brainwashed, that he's the perfect worker because he doesn't ask for more. But that misses the point. He's loyal to the values he brings with him. Care, effort, consistency. That's why he stays cheerful. He's choosing to treat it like it matters, and because of that, it does. In most jobs, people wait for meaning to show up. SpongeBob brings it. It's steady, and that steadiness, over time, becomes powerful. Even Squidward notices, in his own way. He rolls his eyes, makes sarcastic comments, and avoids responsibility. But deep down, he knows SpongeBob is good at what he does. He just can't understand why someone would care so much. And that's the real tension in both episodes. SpongeBob keeps showing people that joy is a decision. It lives in the way you approach the moment you're in, even if that moment is boring or uncomfortable or hard. You see this clearly when SpongeBob trains under pressure in Band Geeks, or when he wipes down tables with enthusiasm in the training video. The tasks don't matter. The energy he brings to them does. This is about being present. SpongeBob is just doing the best with what's in front of him. And he does it without needing to be thanked or noticed. That kind of quiet joy is rare. And in a way, it's dangerous. Because it challenges how most people think happiness works. It doesn't come from finally making it. It comes from refusing to hold back while you're still on the way. That's why these episodes matter. They take a fast food job and a chaotic marching band and turn them into proof that joy is a practice. One you show up for. Especially on bad days. SpongeBob teaches that lesson without ever saying it out loud. He just lives it, again and again. And maybe that's what real happiness looks like. Just a choice to give your best, even when no one expects it, and to keep showing up anyway. Just a quick reminder to subscribe to our channel. Now, let's get back to the video. So, what happens after the big moment? After SpongeBob wins the crowd, commands the marching band, and proves he's more than the world thinks. What happens when the noise dies down? He goes back to work, back to jellyfishing, back to his little house and his alarm clock and his square pants. But something's different now. We've seen what he can do. He's shown us how far joy, effort, and ridiculous optimism can take someone. And yet, he's still tested. The episodes that follow show something a lot of people miss about happiness. It's about more than just one perfect moment or a great performance. It's what happens when things fall apart, how someone handles it when the plan falls through, when everything feels upside down. Let's start with rock bottom. SpongeBob and Patrick go to Glove World, a goofy little theme park for glove-themed fun. They're laughing, riding rides, being their usual selves. But on the way home, they board the wrong bus. It doesn't just take them to the wrong stop. It takes them down, deep into the ocean, to rock bottom. The name alone tells you everything you need to know. It's dark. It's weird. Everyone speaks in a strange accent. Nothing makes sense. It's the kind of place where everything you know stops working. And for once, SpongeBob can't smile his way out of it. He loses Patrick, misses the bus, fails to get help. His flashlight dies. The line for the ticket booth never ends. And when he finally gets to the front, the bus drives off without him. He stands there in silence as the lights shut off and the station goes cold. It's one of the only moments in the show where SpongeBob looks truly afraid. What matters is what he does with that fear. He gives himself a pep talk. It's small, quiet, but he does it anyway. He tells himself to stay calm. He tries. He fails. He tries again. When a strange raspberry noise echoes down the hallway, he runs, but he doesn't run blindly. He stops. He looks. He yells back. He tries to face it. And then something strange happens. The creature chasing him is a helpful anglerfish who finds his glove balloon. SpongeBob vents. The creature listens. And instead of walking away or giving up, the creature ties the balloon to SpongeBob's wrist and helps him fly home. It's absurd. It's surreal. But it's also deeply kind. SpongeBob doesn't claw his way out. He doesn't conquer the darkness. He gets through it because someone meets his kindness with kindness. Rock Bottom shows that even the happiest people hit a wall. Even the brightest optimism can get lost in the dark. But when that happens, SpongeBob doesn't lash out or sink into despair. He tries to understand. He waits in line. He tells himself it's going to be okay. And in the end, it is. Then comes SpongeBob's last stand. Jellyfish Fields, a place SpongeBob has always loved, is about to be destroyed to make way for a highway. Even Mr. Krabs signs off on the project. SpongeBob, who's usually seen as naive or silly, becomes the one thing trying to protect something important, because he believes it matters. He sings. He protests. He hands out flyers. People laugh at him. They throw the flyers back in his face. They tell him the highway is what everyone wants. It's brutal. But SpongeBob doesn't stop. He stays on message. He doesn't get bitter. He doesn't become self-righteous. He keeps marching. This moment matters because it flips the script. People often mistake happiness for ignorance. They think if someone's smiling, they must not be paying attention. But here, SpongeBob sees everything clearly. He knows what he's up against. He just refuses to let that change who he is. There's a quiet heartbreak in watching someone stay kind while the world shrugs. A protest that gets ignored. A tambourine smashed. A jellyfish field on the chopping block. But SpongeBob keeps going because he thinks it's the right thing to do, even when the odds are low, even when people laugh. So what does all this say about happiness? It's a practice. In Rock Bottom, SpongeBob practices hope. In SpongeBob's Last Stand, he practices courage. In both, he holds on to his joy. He chooses to believe that small actions still matter, that kindness still matters, that jellyfish still matter. And that's what makes it powerful. Because happiness is sometimes about refusing to let the worst parts of life turn you cold. SpongeBob doesn't deny pain. He walks through it. He feels it. And somehow, he still comes out smiling. SpongeBob was back on his feet, walking through the darkness, passing out flyers, or floating home on a balloon. So maybe happiness isn't about everything going right. Maybe it's about staying yourself when everything goes wrong. Happiness is easy to understand when things go your way, but that's not what makes it interesting. The real question is, what does happiness look like when plans fall apart, people ignore you, or everything turns ridiculous? SpongeBob gives us an answer just by being SpongeBob, over and over again. In the camping episode, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to camp in SpongeBob's yard. That's it. They set up a tent just a few feet away from his door, and treat it like a full-on wilderness trip. They make marshmallows, sing songs, and play games like it actually matters. Squidward watches them and can't take it. He makes fun of the whole thing, then sets up his own camp nearby, just to prove he's better at it. And then comes the sea bear. SpongeBob and Patrick have this list of things you're not supposed to do if you don't want to attract a sea bear. Waving flashlights around, wearing sombreros in a goofy fashion, things like that. Squidward does every single one of them. He doesn't believe in sea bears, until he's getting body slammed by one. What's funny is how SpongeBob responds. He stays calm. Every time Squidward gets hurt, he repeats the same advice. Draw a circle, stay inside it. He just wants Squidward to stop getting trampled. He's patient, even when he's being ignored. And when it finally works, SpongeBob doesn't say, "I told you so." He just moves on like it never had to be a fight. That's one version of happiness right there. Just the kind that doesn't disappear when people act difficult. Then there's the best day ever. SpongeBob has it all mapped out. Krabby Patties in the morning, jellyfishing with Patrick, karate with Sandy, and a clarinet concert at night. But every single thing gets canceled. The restaurant shut down, Patrick's net is broken, Sandy's tree dome needs repairs, Squidward's clarinet snaps in half. At any point, he could have thrown a fit. He could have said, "Forget it, this day's ruined." But he doesn't. He keeps helping. One problem after another. No one makes him do it. He just can't walk past someone who needs him. By the end of the day, everything he planned is gone. He's alone with a microphone. And he still sings. He doesn't sing because the day went right. He sings because he stayed connected to the part of himself that wanted to celebrate in the first place. That's what makes it the best day ever. That's a second version of happiness. When you let go of how things were supposed to go, but still keep your heart in the day anyway. And then there's Frankendoodle, which is just chaos from the start. SpongeBob finds a magic pencil that brings whatever he draws to life. It's fun at first. Jellyfish, furniture, sight gags. But then he draws a stick figure version of himself, Doodlebob. Things get out of hand fast. Doodlebob becomes violent, starts erasing everything, even attacks SpongeBob in his own house. Now, this is the kind of story that usually ends with a fight, or a clever trap, or someone saving the day in a flashy way. But SpongeBob doesn't try to beat him. He frames him. Literally. That's a third kind of happiness. When you decide that even parts of life that scare you don't need to be destroyed. Maybe they just need to be understood. Maybe they just need a little space. In all 3 episodes, SpongeBob is smiling because he doesn't tie his joy to control. He doesn't need everything to go according to plan. He doesn't need people to act perfectly. And he doesn't need the world to make sense. He just needs a reason to care. And there's always something to care about. That's the quiet lesson buried under all the jokes and chaos. Happiness doesn't have to be fragile. It doesn't have to leave when things get weird or disappointing. It can hold steady if you let it come from how you move through the world, not just what you get out of it. SpongeBob is a role model because he doesn't give up on the parts of life that make it worth living, even when no one else sees the point, even when the tent is 5 feet from home, even when your best day ever turns into a disaster, even when your own drawing tries to erase you. And maybe that's what keeps people watching, because he makes it easier to believe that even when things go wrong, you don't have to lose your joy. You can keep it close. You can build a circle around it and stay inside. And sometimes, that's enough. SpongeBob makes it look simple because he treats every moment like it matters. A day at work, a broken clarinet, a ruined camping trip. He still shows up with the same energy. That's what makes him different. He doesn't need things to be perfect. He doesn't hold back just because the day doesn't go his way. He finds something good in it anyway. And watching that, again and again, it starts to stick. You realize happiness doesn't always have to be a reward. It can just be how you move through the world, how you carry yourself, how you treat the people around you, even when things are off. That's what SpongeBob teaches us through how he lives. He keeps showing up, even when it's hard. He still finds something to care about. SpongeBob proves happiness is a choice you make. Through chaos, pain, or just another day at the grill, he stays kind, shows up, and finds something worth caring about. He doesn't wait for life to be perfect to smile. The takeaway is that happiness is showing up with heart, no matter what.
Now we'll talk about what Mr. Krabs teaches us about greed.
Mr. Krabs may be a beloved cartoon character, but his obsession with money actually shows us something way worse than just being greedy. He's teaching kids that being a total jerk is okay if you're rich. His constant pursuit of wealth screws over everyone around him. He pays his workers dirt, and he literally poisons customers for profit. Before we start, make sure you're subscribed. Mr. Krabs has a creepy relationship with money that's honestly disturbing when you think about it. The first time we see him in Help Wanted, he's literally sniffing cash at the ordering window like he's completely addicted to it. Most normal people handle money to buy stuff they need, but Mr. Krabs acts like money is the only thing that matters to him. This money-sniffing scene shows us that this guy has serious problems. While his restaurant is falling apart and customers are waiting around, he's too busy obsessing over his cash to actually run his business. This scene shows us that money is his main source of happiness. This sets up everything else we see about his character. When SpongeBob applies for a job, Mr. Krabs makes a choice that seems harmless, but is actually pretty sick. He sends SpongeBob to find a hydrodynamic spatula that doesn't exist. Mr. Krabs knows this item is impossible to find, but he sends the eager young sponge away anyways. He's basically scamming a kid to avoid hiring him. What makes this worse is how Mr. Krabs and Squidward react after SpongeBob leaves. They laugh together about their trick, enjoying the fact that they've fooled someone who just wants a job. This is enjoying crushing someone's dreams for no reason. Mr. Krabs doesn't care who he crushes as long as he comes out richer. But SpongeBob surprises everyone by actually finding the impossible spatula. This shocks Mr. Krabs and Squidward. They never expected to get caught in their lie. Then, the restaurant gets flooded with hungry anchovies, and Mr. Krabs completely loses it. He screams about being overwhelmed and even cries for his mother like a total baby. Here's where Mr. Krabs shows his true nature. Once SpongeBob saves the day and makes him money, his attitude completely changes. The same employee he tried to get rid of suddenly becomes valuable. Mr. Krabs welcomes SpongeBob warmly and praises his cooking skills. But right after this, he immediately goes to count his profits instead of spending time with his new team member. This pattern reveals something troubling about Mr. Krabs. To Mr. Krabs, a person's value starts and ends with their balance sheet. SpongeBob went from being unwanted to being welcomed just because he made him money. The chaperone shows how this money-first thinking affects Mr. Krabs' family life. When Pearl's prom date dumps her, she cries so hard that her tears flood the restaurant and drive away customers. Instead of focusing on comforting his daughter, Mr. Krabs immediately starts thinking about the business problem. His daughter's heartbreak becomes a financial crisis he needs to solve. Mr. Krabs' handling of Pearl's situation shows us how he really thinks. He doesn't ask what would make Pearl happy. He doesn't try to understand her feelings. Instead, he just picks whatever's easiest for him. First himself, then Squidward, then random customers, then SpongeBob. He's basically shopping around for the cheapest babysitter, not caring about what Pearl actually needs as his own daughter. The way Mr. Krabs tricks SpongeBob into taking Pearl to prom is pretty sneaky. He makes it sound like some big honor. "I'm counting on you to make this a very special night for a very special girl," he says. This works because SpongeBob wants to feel important, but really, Mr. Krabs is just getting free labor by making SpongeBob think he's doing something special. Here's the thing about Mr. Krabs. He's figured out how to be selfish while looking like the good guy. Pearl's feelings are a liability to him, something he manages. He likes SpongeBob's hard work, but he uses that loyalty to get what he wants for free. This makes him way more dangerous than someone who's just openly greedy. The prom ending shows exactly what's wrong with Mr. Krabs' thinking. When Pearl and SpongeBob come back after getting kicked out of the dance, does he ask if they're okay? Nope, he shows up with a rake, yelling about protecting his precious little flower, which is actually just a plant in his yard, not his daughter. This scene is actually pretty messed up. Mr. Krabs cares more about a flower than his daughter's feelings after a terrible night. His brain automatically jumps to protecting his stuff, while completely ignoring his kid's emotional needs. The fake SpongeBob thing makes it even worse. Mr. Krabs spends time giving nice advice to what he thinks is his employee, but when the real SpongeBob shows up, does he feel weird about talking to a dummy? Not at all. He just immediately puts the real one to work. He doesn't really care about connecting with people. He just wants to get things done. Mr. Krabs' way of talking gives away to his real thoughts. He calls SpongeBob boy and lad, keeping him at a distance, even when being friendly. He talks about counting booty and calls customers lubbers, like everything's just treasure waiting to be grabbed. His words show someone who sees every person as a potential business deal. Mr. Krabs has mastered the art of making selfishness look like kindness. SpongeBob works harder because he thinks his boss actually likes him. Pearl goes along with bad solutions because she thinks her dad cares about her happiness. They're not totally wrong. Mr. Krabs does care, but even his kindness is transactional. It's never just kindness. Mr. Krabs has built a whole system where his greed wins almost every time. He can be loving and smart when he needs to be, but the smarter he is, the more dangerous he becomes, because he knows how to make decency profitable. This makes him worse than obvious villains because he tricks people into thinking he's on their side. What's really messed up is how Mr. Krabs doesn't even look like a villain. He's not some mustache-twirling bad guy. He's the friendly boss who calls you boy and acts like he's doing you favors. But every single choice he makes puts his money first, even when it screws over the people who trust him the most. This is basically how real manipulators work. The worst people aren't the ones who are obviously jerks to you. They're the ones who make you feel good about yourself while they're screwing you over. Mr. Krabs has gotten really good at this trick, and that's what makes him such a perfect example of how greedy people actually act in real life. Before we continue this video, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's get back to Mr. Krabs. What happens when someone gets so obsessed with money that they'll do anything to get it? Mr. Krabs shows us that greed is a psychological addiction that escalates, making people more dangerous and desperate with every scheme they try. What starts as simple money grabbing transforms into full-blown psychological warfare against everyone around him. The whole thing starts in environments like Goo Lagoon, where everyone's competing to prove they're better than everyone else. Picture those beach scenes where people are flexing muscles, lifting weights, and doing crazy stunts just to get attention. If you can't keep up, you get laughed at or ignored completely. This kind of competitive atmosphere is where greed really takes off, because money becomes the easiest way to prove you're winning. When everyone around you is fighting for status, cash becomes the clearest scoreboard. You can't argue with dollar signs. Either you have money or you don't, and everyone can see which category you fall into. In this world where people will do almost anything for approval, Mr. Krabs just happens to measure his worth in dollars instead of applause. But by one Krabs trash, Mr. Krabs has taken this competition way further than normal people would. He's literally digging through garbage can looking for stuff he can sell, which should be a huge red flag about his priorities. The garage sale scene shows how his greed has evolved from simple money wanting into strategic manipulation. He's creating elaborate backstories, looking customers in the eye and telling them completely made up stories about fancy previous owners. This isn't random lying. Mr. Krabs has developed a system. He studies people's weaknesses and crafts specific psychological tricks designed to make them feel special. When he tells SpongeBob, "You were born to wear this hat," and "You're number one," these aren't casual compliments. They're carefully chosen emotional manipulations designed to make SpongeBob feel like buying this garbage will somehow complete his identity. The really sick part is how Mr. Krabs has learned to weaponize people's trust against them. SpongeBob has no reason to suspect his boss would lie to him, so he believes every word. Mr. Krabs exploits this complete faith by suggesting SpongeBob pay for junk with money he hasn't even earned yet, essentially forcing his employee into debt for trash he pulled from someone else's garbage can. But the real escalation happens when other customers show up offering serious money for the hat. The moment Mr. Krabs hears people talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, his whole personality changes. He starts drooling like a dog seeing a steak, shaking and stammering like he's having some sort of medical episode. Mr. Krabs has trained his brain to react to money like he's completely addicted to it. Once he's in this state, Mr. Krabs starts planning increasingly desperate schemes. He can't just offer to buy back the hat fairly. That would cut into his profits. Instead, he creates an entire fake ghost story complete with props, character voices, and a fictional backstory about Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen. This is a staged emotional ambush designed to terrorize his employee into handing over valuable stuff. Think about what's really happening here. Mr. Krabs is hanging outside SpongeBob's window with fishing lines and fake ghost drawings, basically terrorizing someone who trusts him completely. He's willing to traumatize his employee, make him think he's in genuine spiritual danger, just to avoid paying fair value for something he wants. It's a con disguised as a ghost story. When his elaborate plan backfires and SpongeBob actually finds a real grave with the exact name, any normal person would take this as a sign to give up. The universe has basically told him no in the clearest possible way. But Mr. Krabs sees a minor obstacle between him and his money. The fact that he has to rob an actual grave doesn't slow him down at all. Sacred boundaries, right and wrong, and basic human dignity all becomes meaningless when money is involved. The cemetery scene is where his greed reaches its most delusional peak. Mr. Krabs has to sneak through a graveyard at night, stepping over other people's grief and loss to rob a specific grave. There's even a moment where he encounters Squidward placing flowers on a grave marked, "Here lies Squidward's hopes and dreams," and Mr. Krabs just calls him a baby and moves on. He can't even recognize genuine emotion anymore. Everything gets filtered through his obsession with money. When he finally starts digging up Smitty's grave, he's crossed every line that separates normal behavior from complete psychosis. This is literally stealing from the dead, violating the most sacred thing in human culture, just to get his hands on a piece of cloth that might make him rich. Even when zombie warriors rise up and try to tear him apart with swords, he's still clutching the stolen hat and thinking about his profits. His greed has become stronger than his basic will to live. The episode's sick twist ending makes everything even worse. After Mr. Krabs beat the zombie army and rushes back to collect his $1 million, the buyers tell him they found a warehouse full of identical hats. All that psychological warfare, all that grave robbing and zombie fighting was for nothing. The treasure was completely worthless. Meanwhile, the secret box shows us how this sick mentality spreads to other people around Mr. Krabs. Patrick's desperate need to protect his secret box mirrors Mr. Krabs' paranoid hoarding of money. Patrick's crazy reactions, constantly clutching the box, threatening to end friendships over it, setting up weird security measures, show what happens when someone becomes totally obsessed with protecting their stuff. The competitive environment that feeds Mr. Krabs' greed creates similar obsession in others, who become desperately protective of their own possessions. SpongeBob gets so consumed with curiosity that he breaks into his friend's house at night, lies, and risks their entire friendship just to satisfy this need to know. The hoarding mentality becomes like a disease, infecting people with the same paranoid, possessive thinking that drives Mr. Krabs. This whole pattern reveals something scary about how greed works as an addiction. Mr. Krabs started with small lies and minor tricks at his yard sale, but each success made him bolder and more desperate for bigger scores. Selling garbage as antiques led to psychological manipulation of employees, which led to elaborate scam schemes, which led to grave robbing and fighting supernatural forces. Each step seemed reasonable compared to the previous one, but together they created a path toward complete moral collapse. The escalation shows us that greed is about wanting control over other people. Mr. Krabs wants to squeeze every possible cent from every possible source, regardless of what it costs others. He wants the power that comes from being able to mess with people's emotions and desires for his own benefit. What makes this especially dangerous is how each step builds from the previous one. People don't usually wake up one day and decide to rob graves. They start with small compromises and tiny violations of their own principles, then gradually work their way up to bigger crimes. Each new bad thing feels justified because it's only slightly worse than what they've already done. By the time Mr. Krabs is fighting zombies in a cemetery, he's traveled so far from normal human behavior that he can't even see how crazy his situation has become. He's completely lost sight of what's important in life, what's worth fighting for, and what lines should never be crossed. The money has become more real to him than the people he's hurting or the relationships he's destroying. This escalation reveals the true danger of unchecked greed. It doesn't just corrupt the person who has it, it creates a psychological battlefield that damages everyone around them. Friends become targets for manipulation, employees become things to exploit psychologically, and even sacred places like burial grounds become obstacles to overcome rather than boundaries to respect. Going from simple competition to psychological warfare shows exactly how far someone can fall when money addiction takes control of their brain. What happens when someone gets so good at being greedy, they turn it into a system other people worship? Mr. Krabs has achieved something way more dangerous than just wanting money. He's created a corporate culture where employees celebrate their own exploitation while thinking they're part of something special. The Krusty Krab training video and the algae's always greener show us how personal greed becomes institutionalized culture that traps everyone inside of it. The training video reveals Mr. Krabs' most dangerous achievement, transforming his personal obsession with money into a workplace religion that other people willingly follow. This is about creating a system where employees thank you for screwing them over. The video starts by selling viewers a lie wrapped in feel-good corporate speak. The narrator calls Mr. Krabs a financial wizard and talks about his hard work, preservation, perseverance, vision, determination, and sweat. But then we see the truth. Young Mr. Krabs cheating a soda machine with a quarter tied to a string. He's not a brilliant entrepreneur. He's always been a petty thief who learned to make stealing look respectable. This origin story reveals something crucial about how corporate mythology works. The video doesn't hide Mr. Krabs cheating. It reframes it as cleverness and resourcefulness. When the narrator says his luck changed when he acquired a bankrupt retirement home, we're seeing someone who takes advantage of other people's failures. But the language makes it sound like smart business strategy. The training video's description of basic restaurant equipment shows how Mr. Krabs has mastered the art of corporate gaslighting. A spatula becomes an advanced patty control mechanism. A cash register becomes an automated money handling system. Ice cubes become high-quality beverage temperature devices. A straw becomes a prototype liquid transfer machine. Ketchup packets become state-of-the-art condiment dispersal units. This is psychological manipulation designed to make employees feel like they're part of something innovative and important. Mr. Krabs has figured out that people will work harder and complain less if they believe they're involved in high-tech operations, rather than just flipping burgers for minimum wage. He's selling them a fantasy about their own importance while paying them scraps. The most revealing moment comes from when Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob there's a standing fee just for being in the restaurant. He's literally trying to charge his own employee for existing in the workspace. This shows how completely the corporate culture has warped everyone's thinking. Even the idea of paying someone to work for you gets turned upside down. The video's treatment of employees reveals the cult-like structure Mr. Krabs has created. SpongeBob is described as having the makings of a good employee because he's poised, confident, and has a smile that says, "Hello world, may I take your order?" Notice what matters in this system: appearance, attitude, and willingness to serve customers. There's nothing about fair compensation, job security, or personal development. Meanwhile, Squidward gets dismissed as lazy and inattentive, with his "I really wish I weren't here right now" button held up as proof of his bad attitude. But Squidward's unhappiness is a normal human response to being underpaid and undervalued. The training video frames legitimate workplace complaints as personality defects rather than systemic problems. The acronym POOP, People Order Our Patties, show how Mr. Krabs has learned to make exploitation sound cute and memorable. He's taken the obvious fact that customers want food and turned it into a corporate motto that employees are supposed to find inspiring. The video treats this basic concept like profound business wisdom, showing how corporate culture inflates simple ideas to make leadership seem smarter than it is. The personal hygiene section reveals how the system demands perfection while providing no support to achieve it. SpongeBob scrubs his hands so hard they become invisible, cuts off facial hair with scissors, and carefully maintains a single hair under his hat. This is about creating impossible standards that keep employees constantly anxious about their performance. The emergency drill shows how Mr. Krabs has turned protecting profits into heroic duty. When Plankton tries to steal a Krabby Patty, SpongeBob just runs around screaming instead of actually helping. But the narrator celebrates this as excellent crisis management because the patty gets saved. The system cares more about protecting property than training people to handle real emergencies. The video builds up to revealing the secret formula, with religious language about sacred and dark secrets, and mouth-watering, spine-tingling, heart-stopping pleasure. But then it cuts off right before telling anything useful, leaving viewers with nothing but hype and anticipation. This perfectly demonstrates how corporate culture operates. Lots of big promises, but no actual substance or benefit for workers. The Algae's Always Greener takes this corporate nightmare and shows what happens when someone actually tries to live at the center of the system Mr. Krabs has created. Plankton uses his life-switching machine to become the Krusty Krab owner, thinking he'll finally have the easy life he's always envied. Instead, he discovers that Mr. Krabs has created a prison where even the warden is trapped. When Plankton wakes up as Mr. Plankton, his first reaction is pure joy. He sees the nameplate, the wealth, the successful restaurant, and thinks he's won the lottery. But the problem starts immediately when SpongeBob comes in begging for his weekly performance review. This reveals something disturbing about the workplace culture. Employees have been conditioned to be so desperate for attention and validation that they'll plead to be criticized. When Plankton finally gives SpongeBob mild feedback about using too much sauce, SpongeBob has a complete psychological breakdown. His eyes shrink, his nose droops, his mouth shrinks, and he starts stuttering uncontrollably. This is someone who's been mentally conditioned to see any negative feedback as a personal disaster. Plankton tries to fix things by promoting SpongeBob to co-cashier, which immediately creates conflict when Squidward gets angry about sharing his position. These workplace dynamics show how the system pits employees against each other instead of encouraging cooperation. SpongeBob and Squidward aren't allies. They're rivals fighting for scraps of approval from their boss, which keeps them focused on competing with each other instead of questioning why they're both underpaid and overworked. Pearl's entrance reveals another dimension of the system's dysfunction. She asks for an advance on her allowance, and when Plankton gives her $1 thinking he's being generous, she starts crying so hard her tears flood the restaurant. Even family relationships have been corrupted by the culture of financial stinginess that the business demands. The customer complaints show the impossible standards the system creates. A fish complains about Squidward's terrible cooking, a patty made with wood, an eyeball, and other disgusting ingredients. When SpongeBob has another breakdown because he gave someone a large soda instead of a medium, "I've soiled the Krusty Krab's good name!" he screams repeatedly, showing how employees have internalized impossible perfectionist standards. But the real horror begins when the emergency alarm goes off, and alternate universe Mr. Krabs appears, now reduced to Krabs, swinging through the restaurant naked, desperately trying to steal a Krabby Patty. This pathetic figure represents what Mr. Krabs would become without this system. Desperate, failed, and willing to do anything for a taste of what he's missing. The other characters describe this alternate Krabs as crawling out from the lowest trench in the ocean and being the most hated creature in Bikini Bottom. This is the system's greatest fear, being reduced to the level of desperation and failure that it exploits in others. After SpongeBob defeats Krabs with a clothing cannon, the real nightmare becomes clear. Krabs promises to return tomorrow, and the next day, repeating this threat endlessly. Plankton realizes he'll have to deal with this same break-in attempt every single day for the rest of his life. The victory screech that everyone does shows the system trains people to celebrate small wins while ignoring the bigger picture of constant threat and exhaustion. Krabs' final threat, repeated endlessly as he walks away and continues over the phone, drives Plankton to his breaking point. The constant repetition of "and the next day" reveals the relentless nature of life at the center of this system. The same problems, the same threats, the same stress, over and over forever. This is when Plankton finally understands what Mr. Krabs has really created. It's not just wealth, it's a prison of corporate culture where everyone is trapped, including the person at the top. The money doesn't buy freedom or happiness, it just creates new problems and responsibilities while maintaining a system that damages everyone inside of it. The episode's climax comes when Plankton screams, "It's not worth it! It's just not worth it!" and tears off his clothes, symbolically rejecting everything that seemed desirable about Mr. Krabs' position. When he returns to his own universe and calls his holographic meatloaf "my favorite," the fake food that seemed pathetic at the beginning now looks like luxury compared to the psychological prison of corporate success. Both episodes work together to show how personal greed evolves into institutional culture. The training video reveals how Mr. Krabs has built a system that exploits people while making them grateful for the exploitation. The algae Zoe's greener shows the personal cost of maintaining that system. Constant stress, damaged relationships, and the knowledge that everyone around you is either trying to use you or steal from you. Mr. Krabs has achieved something more dangerous than individual wealth. He's created a corporate culture that runs on other people's desperation and neediness. SpongeBob begs for criticism. Squidward competes for scraps of approval. Pearl cries when money is scarce. And customers complain when quality slips. Every relationship has become transactional, based on what the system can extract rather than genuine human connection. The genius of these episodes is showing how greed stops being personal and becomes cultural. Mr. Krabs hasn't just gotten rich. He's created a machine that converts human relationships into profit. And that machine has become bigger than any individual inside of it. Even he is trapped by the system he built, unable to escape the constant demands and threats that his success has created. The fact that even Plankton, Mr. Krabs' most dedicated enemy, can't survive living inside this system shows just how toxic it's become. When the person who envies you most can't stand to live your life, you've created something that goes beyond personal failure into institutional horror. Mr. Krabs has turned greed into a religion, and everyone who works for him has become a believer in their own exploitation. If you're enjoying the video, then don't forget to subscribe.
What happens when someone's greed finally gets exposed in front of everyone? Most people would feel shame, try to make amends, or at least pause to reflect on what went wrong. But Mr. Krabs reveals something disturbing about how deeply financial obsession can corrupt thinking. Instead of learning moral lessons from disasters, he immediately starts calculating how to profit from the wreckage he just created. It isn't stubbornness or denial. Mr. Krabs has developed a form of greed that's become immune to consequence, treating every failure as valuable market research for his next scheme. Each time his methods blow up spectacularly, he sees strategic intelligence that makes him more effective next time. In Greasy Buffoons, we watch this adaptation process in real time. After nearly poisoning an entire town with restaurant grease and getting both the Krusty Krab and Chum Bucket shut down by health inspectors, Mr. Krabs' response reveals how his mind has been rewired by financial obsession. When SpongeBob tries to report the contamination, Mr. Krabs immediately focuses on damage control to protect his revenue stream. The assault on SpongeBob shows how quickly Mr. Krabs pivots from one strategy to another. When he realizes his employee is about to expose the grease feeding scheme, he teams up with Plankton to stuff SpongeBob in a trash can and roll him off a cliff. This is calculated problem solving. Mr. Krabs has identified the threat to his profits and developed a tactical response within seconds. When the health inspector finally shuts down both restaurants, Mr. Krabs doesn't waste time on remorse or self-reflection. "I guess this is it, boy. The end of an era," he tells SpongeBob, but his tone is purely practical. He's already mentally moving to the next stage of operation. The shutdown is a temporary technical difficulty that requires operational adjustment. The most revealing moment comes when SpongeBob absorbs all the grease into his own body to clean up the contamination. A normal person would feel grateful that their employee just risked his life to fix their mistake. But the final shot shows Mr. Krabs watching Patrick lick SpongeBob like a crunchy munchity and getting that familiar calculating look in his eyes. Instead of gratitude or concern, he's already processing this new information. His employee has become a walking food product. This reaction shows how Mr. Krabs' mind has been completely reprogrammed by profit seeking. SpongeBob's sacrifice registers as a new business opportunity that needs development. The near disaster that should have taught him about the dangers of putting profits over people instead teaches him about the commercial potential of grease-filled employees. Squilliam Returns reveals another dimension of his adaptive immunity to consequence. When Squidward's elaborate deception collapses and the restaurant descends into chaos, Mr. Krabs sees entertainment value in the breakdown. The
disaster unfolds with spectacular violence, as SpongeBob, having erased his memory to make room for fine dining knowledge, starts assaulting customers with hot soup and kitchen tools. People crash through windows trying to escape, while SpongeBob goes permanently insane from psychological pressure. This should be a crisis that demands immediate intervention and damage control. But Mr. Krabs' response reveals how his perspective has been warped by constant scheming. When he gets free from being tied up in the kitchen, his priority is warning people about the monster appetizer he's created. He's thinking like a liability manager, not a human being watching other humans get hurt. When Squidward finally breaks down completely, confessing to Squilliam that he's just a cashier with tear-filled eyes, Mr. Krabs treats this genuine moment of vulnerability as background entertainment. He pulls out his tiny violin and starts playing, literally turning his employees' psychological destruction into a musical performance for his own amusement. This response shows how Mr. Krabs has learned to extract value from every situation, including other people's suffering. Squidward's humiliation doesn't register as workplace trauma that requires supportive management. It registers as free entertainment that adds ambience to his evening. The violin playing is Mr. Krabs optimizing his experience by turning available resources into personal enjoyment. Both situations follow the same pattern of strategic adaptation rather than moral reflection. The grease contamination teaches Mr. Krabs about new product possibilities and better employee control methods. The restaurant chaos teaches him about the entertainment value of employee breakdowns and the musical potential of workplace suffering. These aren't random reactions, they're systemic learning processes. Mr. Krabs encounters problems, analyzes what information the problems reveal, and immediately begins calculating how to monetize or leverage that information for future advantage. Each failure becomes market research that makes his next schemes more sophisticated. The speed of this adaptation is what makes it so disturbing. Hours after nearly destroying Bikini Bottom with contaminated food, Mr. Krabs is already developing new business concepts. Minutes after watching his employee have a mental breakdown, he's already optimizing his entertainment options. There's no pause for reflection. No period of considering whether his methods might be fundamentally wrong. This immediate pivot reveals how greed has rewired his basic cognitive processes. Normal human responses like guilt, empathy, or moral concern have been replaced by constant profit calculation algorithms. Every input gets automatically processed through a "how can this make me money" filter, regardless of how traumatic or dangerous the input might be. The community's response enables this adaptive immunity by providing inconsistent consequences. The health inspector shuts down restaurants temporarily, but doesn't pursue criminal charges for deliberately poisoning customers. No one calls police when SpongeBob starts assaulting people with kitchen tools. The message Mr. Krabs receives is that temporary setbacks are acceptable costs of doing business, as long as you maintain plausible deniability. These weak consequences teach Mr. Krabs exactly the wrong lessons. Instead of learning that his methods are too dangerous to continue, he learns how much damage he can cause before facing serious intervention. The people around Mr. Krabs also contribute to this immunity through their continued participation. SpongeBob working despite being assaulted while trying to report food contamination. Squidward returns to work despite having his mental health destroyed for the restaurant's benefit. Customers come back to eat at establishments that just served contaminated food or witness violent breakdowns. This pattern shows Mr. Krabs that he can push people much farther than normal boundaries would suggest. Their continued loyalty despite obvious mistreatment teaches him that his exploitation methods are sustainable long term. Each person who stays after being harmed becomes proof that his cost-benefit calculations are correct. Mr. Krabs has also learned to weaponize people's virtues against them in increasingly sophisticated ways. SpongeBob's willingness to sacrifice himself becomes a new product development opportunity. Squidward's desire for dignity becomes a source of entertainment rather than something deserving respect. Every positive human quality becomes a lever he can use to extract additional value. This represents an evolved form of manipulation that turns people's best instincts into vulnerabilities. Mr. Krabs has figured out how to make loyalty, dedication, and hope work against the people who possess these qualities. It's not enough to exploit their labor. He's learned to exploit their character traits as well. Both episodes end with Mr. Krabs in essentially the same operational position he started in, but armed with new strategic intelligence. The crises haven't taught him to be more ethical. They've taught him to be more effective. Each disaster becomes a training exercise that improves his manipulation techniques and expands his understandings of how much damage people will tolerate. This reveals the most dangerous aspect of advanced greed. It evolves into a learning system that becomes more sophisticated with each failure. Rather than serving as warnings to change course, consequences become become education for more refined exploitation methods. The immune system actively converts them into tactical advantages. Mr. Krabs has achieved something more disturbing than simple selfishness. He's developed a form of greed that feeds on its own failures, growing stronger and more adapted with each exposure to consequence. Every time the system should break down from its own toxicity, it instead learns how to become more resilient and more effective at avoiding detection while causing harm. What happens when someone's greed becomes so deep that it changes how they see everything around them? Mr. Krabs shows us that long-term financial obsession doesn't just affect behavior, it actually rewires the brain, creating permanent cognitive damage that makes it impossible to recognize real value, genuine relationships, or basic reality. Over time, this mental corruption becomes his entire identity, turning him into someone who literally cannot perceive the world except through dollar signs. The most disturbing thing about watching Mr. Krabs across multiple episodes is seeing how his greed has progressively damaged his ability to process information normally. What started as wanting more money has evolved into a complete inability to see anything that doesn't fit his profit-seeking algorithms. His brain has been so thoroughly reprogrammed that he can no longer distinguish between people and products, between relationships and transactions, or between reality and hallucination. The Krusty Sponge reveals the full extent of this cognitive corruption when a food critic praises SpongeBob's cooking, saying that sponge behind the grill is no square when it comes to cooking. A normal person would celebrate having a talented employee, but Mr. Krabs' brain doesn't process employee appreciation anymore. It automatically converts every input into monetization opportunity. Within hours, he transformed his entire restaurant into the Krusty Sponge, creating SpongeBob-themed napkins, straws, coasters, bibs, ice cubes, and condiment bottles. Mr. Krabs can no longer see SpongeBob as a person with feelings, rights, or autonomy. His path has been so completely restructured around profit-seeking that SpongeBob registers purely as exploitable brand asset. He doesn't ask permission to use SpongeBob's image, doesn't share profits from the merchandise, and doesn't recognize that forcing SpongeBob to drive tourist trains instead of cooking is causing genuine distress. The most telling moment comes from when Mr. Krabs starts showing signs of complete psychological breakdown. When Squidward asks if he's taking things too far, Mr. Krabs responds by calling Squidward SpongeBob and saying he'll be in his SpongeBob office if anyone needs him. His obsession with monetizing SpongeBob's identity has become so consuming that he's lost basic cognitive functions like recognizing different people or remembering his own office name. But the real horror emerges when Mr. Krabs decides to serve spoiled food just because it happens to be yellow like SpongeBob. This reveals how thoroughly his perception of reality has been distorted. Normal brains process rotten meat as dangerous health hazard, but Mr. Krabs' brain processes it as color-coordinated branding opportunity. When Squidward points out that he's asking people to pay for contaminated food, Mr. Krabs doubles the price. His damaged neural circuitry literally cannot compute the concept of too dangerous to sell. The consequences are immediate and obvious as customers start turning yellow with green spots and stumbling around like zombies from food poisoning. But even when SpongeBob begs him to help the victims, Mr. Krabs initially thinks the sick customers are actual zombies coming to steal his money. His brain has become so corrupted that it can't distinguish between poisoning victims and supernatural threats. Everything gets filtered through Protect the Profits programming. Penny Foolish shows an even more severe form of this cognitive damage. The episode starts with Mr. Krabs watching SpongeBob pick up what he thinks is a penny from the street. A normal person's brain would process this as insignificant event or good for him. Mr. Krabs' obsession with money is so strong that seeing someone else find a coin completely freaks him out. The obsession immediately takes over his entire cognitive system. While driving home, he starts hallucinating pennies everywhere. In his radio dial, his steering wheel, even the moon. This is a literal brain malfunction where his visual processing centers have been so damaged by greed that they're generating false sensory data. He's seeing copper coins that don't exist because his neural networks can no longer distinguish between reality and profit-seeking fantasies. Over the following days, Mr. Krabs' brain drives him to increasingly irrational behavior. He builds an entire movie theater just to charge SpongeBob 1 penny admission, stages a fake charity called Pennies for the Penniless, and finally breaks into SpongeBob's house at night with a metal detector. The resources he wastes probably exceed several dollars, but his corrupted cognitive processes can't perform basic cost-benefit analysis anymore. They can only execute acquire-specific coin programming, regardless of economic logic. The most revealing moment comes when SpongeBob shows him that the object was never a penny at all, just a piece of old chewing gum for his collection. A normal brain would feel embarrassed about the mistake and move on. But Mr. Krabs' mind is so warped that he literally cannot process evidence that contradicts his profit-seeking delusions. The episode ends with him digging holes around SpongeBob's house, still searching for a penny that never existed, because his brain has become physically incapable of accepting information that doesn't support money acquisition. Meanwhile, the thing SpongeBob actually found was a $500 bill, vastly more valuable than the imaginary penny Mr. Krabs was obsessing over. But because SpongeBob's brain functions normally, he doesn't recognize its monetary value and tosses it aside. This creates a perfect illustration of how greed actually makes people worse at acquiring wealth. Mr. Krabs' cognitive corruption has made him so focused on small imaginary profits that he can't recognize real opportunities. Over time, being obsessed with money slowly hurts his brain. In The Krusty Sponge, Mr. Krabs becomes so focused on monetizing SpongeBob that he loses the ability to distinguish between food safety and branding opportunities. In Penny Foolish, he becomes so focused on acquiring a specific coin that he loses the ability to process contradictory evidence or perform rational economic calculations. This shows how greed fundamentally rewires neural architecture over time. What starts as wanting more money gradually destroys the brain's ability to process any information that doesn't support wealth acquisition. Mr. Krabs has trained his neural networks so intensively around profit-seeking that they've lost the capacity for normal human perception, emotional recognition, or logical reasoning. The impact extends beyond financial calculations to basic social cognition. Mr. Krabs can no longer recognize SpongeBob as an individual person. He's become a walking brand opportunity. He can't recognize Squidward's legitimate workplace concerns. They become obstacles to monetization. He can't recognize customer safety issues. They become cost factors in profit equations. The cognitive corruption explains why Mr. Krabs never learns from consequences or shows genuine remorse. His brain can't understand ideas like hurting others or doing the right thing because years of focusing on greed have erased those thoughts. When he gets arrested for poisoning customers, he doesn't feel guilty. His brain just processes the situation as legal obstacle requiring negotiation strategy. The most chilling aspect is how this greed has become permanent and self-reinforcing. Every greedy thought makes his brain focus more on money and less on things like empathy, right and wrong, or even what's real. Mr. Krabs' brain has become a machine that can only execute money acquisition programs, regardless of how irrational or destructive those programs become. This progression reveals something terrifying about how financial obsession works. Unlike temporary psychological states that people can recover from, greed appears to be permanent. Mr. Krabs has lost fundamental cognitive abilities that normal humans use to navigate social relationships, make rational decisions, and distinguish between imagination and reality. The episode shows us that greed is almost like a neurological disease that destroys the brain's capacity for normal human experience. Mr. Krabs hasn't chosen to be selfish. He's systemically destroyed his own ability to perceive anything except potential profit sources. He's become a cautionary tale about how the pursuit of money can literally reprogram human consciousness, creating beings that look human, but can no longer think, feel, or perceive like actual people. What makes this particularly disturbing is how the damage spreads beyond Mr. Krabs to affect everyone around him. People working in his orbit start accepting his warped perception of reality as normal. They begin to see themselves through his eyes, as products to be exploited rather than individuals deserving respect. The cognitive corruption becomes contagious, creating an environment where everyone's ability to think clearly becomes compromised by proximity to someone whose brain has been destroyed by greed. But here's the most terrifying part. Mr. Krabs is the perfect villain precisely because he doesn't look like one. He's the friendly boss who calls you boy and acts like he's doing you favors. His laugh is infectious, his antics are comedic, and his obsession with money seems almost charming in its cartoonish extremity. That we're supposed to find him entertaining, even lovable in his greedy absurdity. This is what makes him so dangerous in the real world. The worst exploiters aren't the ones who openly advertise their cruelty. They're the ones who make you laugh while they're picking your pocket, who make you feel grateful for being underpaid, who turn their psychological warfare into comedy so you don't realize you're the target. Mr. Krabs has achieved the ultimate form of predatory camouflage. He's made his victims complicit in their own exploitation by making the whole thing seem fun. The system never needed to punish Mr. Krabs for being a monster, because the system was designed to reward exactly this kind of behavior. Every scheme that should have destroyed him instead taught him how to be more effective. Every crisis that should have ended his career instead became a stepping stone to greater success. He didn't have to choose between being evil and being successful. The world he operates in made those the same thing. Mr. Krabs represents the most insidious form of corruption, the kind that hides behind humor, tradition, and familiarity until you can't imagine the world working any other way. He's the villain because being funny and likable is exactly what makes people like him so incredibly dangerous. If you guys enjoyed our video on Mr. Krabs, then subscribe so you don't miss videos like these.